the plan for today is we've done our introductions, and what we are going to do is walk through sort of three phases. I kind of alluded to it earlier in the messaging. The first one is this concept of a climate of development, which really speaks broadly to the questions that are being asked about kind of finding that balance. And then we'll get into sort of, I think, a really key kind of conceptual frame, which is the coach as a game designer. And when we start thinking kind of broadly about why kids play, then we start move into the role of the coach. We will finish with the basketball specific stuff. So your questions about kind of positionless basketball and the 5-out offense and offensive and defensive tactics, that will mainly be the last section. Knowing that that's important to all of you, I'll try to reserve as much time as possible for that portion. But I don't want to actually miss out on these first two sections, which are really, really, really key to framing our coaching approach, which I think is really arguably more important than our basketball approach for this age group. 11 to 13 is really still such babies, right? These are babies, and we need to have that sort of clear understanding in mind of why they play and what our role is as the coach. So does that sound okay? Any questions about that? Cool, great. So I suppose as a starting point, I'm just going to play a short clip. Some of you may have seen this. This was the Let Kids Be Kids media campaign from about 5 years ago from the All Blacks.
I played for a little club called Tory down in Otago, Kura Rugby Club.
Scorpions training grounds in Aotearoa.
Marist, based in Mount Albert in Auckland. Jury Rugby Club, Liverpool Seagulls Rugby League Club.
And a club called Taniwha.
Burnside Rugby Club. Marist St Michael's. Tākeka Rugby Club. Ngaiwi Primary School. Called Tokoro Rugby Club.
Playing with my friends and seeing my mum and dad there, supporting me.
Having fun, laughing about, and then having a plate of food afterwards, often falling over and grazing my knees on the frost.
Playing my first game and getting smashed all the time and crying, and I said, oh, where are those tears coming from?
Waking up and going with my mates to rugby and then hanging out for the rest of the day.
Hanging out with your friends was far more important than the end result that we ever had.
It was just about having fun.
Enjoying with my mates and showing my parents that I could really play.
I always wanted to go out there and play hard and have a good time.
The fun factor and the enjoyment factor of it was the main thing and why I played the game and still do.
You always remember the loudmouth parent that would stand on the sideline and have a crack at the ref or their own son. And I remember as a young fella thinking, I'm so pleased my dad's not embarrassing me like that.
Some of the stuff was like, kill him, or, that was pretty crap to hear from the sideline, was, people shouting out, kill him.
Sometimes it was at the players and sometimes it was, between parents squabbling with each other. I think as a coach, you've got to, whether it's with young kids or with the All Blacks, you've got a responsibility to turn them into better people.
We're out there to support them, not to criticise them, and just let them have fun.
Coming from a father's perspective, knowing how much I love my child, we got to let kids be kids and take a step back from that and understand that everyone else loves their kids just as much.
Got to the parent and tell them to take a breath, maybe explain to them why they're there.
Try not to ruin the experience with fun for the kids. Let kids be kids. It's not about you at all. So just turn up, support them, be hearty.
They're going out there to do their best. They want to enjoy the occasion.
So I think just letting the kids be kids is the best thing to do.
Cool. So it's a really important message. And it's an important message that we need to take to heart in the way that we coach our kids and coach in this program. I think as an entity, as a basketball kind of program, we really believe in this concept of a climate of development. So what does that mean? It means that sort of our objectives are really around, number one, retention, enjoyment of the experience for sure. But also long-term skill development. So having a long-term focus on player development is central to that. So one of the things that we believe in is that if we build sort of an approach that is development focused, we're more likely to produce all the outcomes that we think are really, really crucial for kids, right? Like, we don't want kids to drop out of the sport because they don't like it. We don't want kids to feel that they have been disregarded or left out. We want kids to want to keep playing and develop a love of the game. And we definitely want to keep it safe. So we want them to not get injured. I guess my question to you guys as a kind of a framing, because I want this to be interactive, why do you think kids are playing? Like, why are kids playing? What's their motivation for being there? And I'll just open that up as a general question so anyone can answer.
Actually, because these days, social media has been accessible to like anyone. And when I trained for the first time with the boys, all they talked about is who they wanted to be as a player in the Houston Rockets. That's why we're called the Rockets. So that one of them wanted to be Russell Westbrook, one of them wanted to be Harden, and so on. And I just think that that's one of the main factors that they play, is that they want to be like their role models, like Russell Westbrook, because he's such a great point guard and he's athletic. So, and I think that's one of my main reasons as well why I wanted to play, just to like be one of my idols. So yeah.
Okay. Others? Corey, what do you think? Why does your son play?
Well, I think originally, and I think one of my co-coaches said the same thing in his intro. I think they played because they saw you play, or they followed along in their family's path. And I know that even at Harbour, I saw a lot of that. You talked about, oh, this kid's dad is so and so, and brother is, and I think that's part of the reason. I mean, that definitely the role model, but they all play to have fun. Like, they play because they love the game. They have a passion for it. They've chosen to play it, and especially at this level, so it's cool.
Absolutely. Yeah. Junius, why does Cedric play?
Well, I asked him about that, and then he told me that he just wanted to play with me. So it's like he's looking forward when, like, probably when he will be like 16, 15, or then he can play with me. So that's he just want to have fun. Just have to maybe that's a good thing for me, because we can have, like, maybe we can be friends, like when he will reach his teenager years, and maybe in his early adulthood, so I can support him whatever he wanted. Yeah, but for other kids, I think the most reason, since I've experienced some of coaching younger kids, is eventually they want to be like some other players, like as my co-coach mentioned, that they wanted to be like LeBron James, they wanted to be like Michael Jordan, they wanted to play like that, like them. So yeah, they some sort of motivation for them, and then the encouragement to play, because they saw this in TV or in any movies that inspired them, I think.
So I think it's really interesting. I was one of those kids, like Tab, what you said reminds me of when I was a kid, because when I was a kid, my dad and I used to sit and watch Laker games every Friday and Saturday night. Like, that was what we did in the evenings. And during breaks, I'd go out into the yard and I would shoot and try to like mimic what I saw, my favorite players doing.
Exactly.
And,
that's actually what I still do. Like, I just watched the game, like Milwaukee versus Heat, and it's, the court's just outside, so I just do the same thing.
And so it's like, it's an interesting thing, because you see, as multiple things. You have this sort of like desire to connect with people through the game. So like, you guys have sort of already said, well, Junius, like, he wants to play against you. He wants to build a relationship with you. He also wants something that he can get better at, something that gives him a feeling of confidence and ability. And lots of kids, we sort of are operating under this assumption that most kids are there because they enjoy the game. They want to build these relationships through the game, and they want to have fun and be active. And it's just something they like doing. Obviously, there may be some kids who are in our program whose parents have pushed them to play. Maybe their parent was a good player, and their child feels that they have a duty or a responsibility to play because they don't want to let their father down or their mother down. Like, I can also relate to that a little bit. My dad was always my coach. I didn't want to let my dad down as a player. And so part of what we're doing is having to maintain this awareness to the motivation for play. And the motivation for play, we don't have complete control over. So we can't tell a kid why they should or shouldn't play, but we can create conditions that promote a certain kind of motivation. And the kind of motivation we want is called intrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation is the opposite of extrinsic, right? Intrinsic is I play because I enjoy playing. Extrinsic is I play because I want to be recognized in some way. I want to win an award. I want to be seen as the best. I want to please someone else. And there will always be a certain amount of that. You can't completely eliminate that. But what we don't want to do is create an environment where the enjoyment of the game is lost and it's replaced by these extrinsic motivators, right? And so what do we mean by that? So just to be clear, we've framed this. Now, I was part of the group that created this document, this concept of the good sports spine, and it's based on a lot of the research that we know around motivation and around long-term athlete development. And what we know is that, when you think about this climate of development, what we're talking about is a shift in focus. If we focus mostly on effort and improvement, and again, skill improvement, it's not just sort of like getting slightly, we want to see kids get better at the game, but our focus is on getting better at the game, and we're not too consumed by the outcomes, okay, the winning and the losing. Part of what we also know about motivation is relationships are key, feeling connected to the people you're in the environment with. So we say is everyone matters, not only the best players, okay? And when everyone matters, you are intentionally, that really comes down to how you structure training and how you do your substitutions, right? And we'll talk a little bit about that. One of the things we also know as kids, it's motivating when you have choice. So that's the notion of empowerment and sharing in control versus strict adult control. Everybody knows that you hate having a micromanaging boss or a coach who's constantly correcting every mistake that you make. You have to give them a little bit of freedom to figure things out on their own. I would say that those are like really the key things. And if you really look at it, sort of effort and improvement focus, everyone matters, kids sharing control, those are the basis of what a good motivational environment is. Whereas this whole notion of a climate of performance, which is what we see in adult professional sport, which sometimes gets mistakenly brought into youth sport, is an over focus on winning and losing, only playing the best players and neglecting or excluding some of the weaker players, and the coach dictating and controlling the game, micromanaging the game, being a bit of a military general. Those are the kind of things we want to avoid. And those things are really, really crucial. I think in terms of this notion of play, as that fourth piece, all of that is made possible by having an emphasis on play. And when we say play, we mean letting them play games, letting them play a lot in training, letting them not over structuring, but having the right amount of structuring. And we'll talk a little bit about that. Does that make sense? Does anybody want to comment on that or react to that in any way?
Sounds good.
Yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Part of the thing that's really interesting about this whole notion of a climate of performance is that what we often see is ex-players who were very good players, who have just come out of an adult professional environment, go into youth sport, and they sort of immediately start applying adult professional coaching strategies in a youth environment. And that's the reason why it's hard there's a difference between being a good player and being a good coach. Coaching and playing are not the same thing. And a lot of people who've been coached in a particular way and succeeded through a climate of performance think, oh, well, that's just what we do. And if you're not up to it, it's something wrong with the player and it's not on the coach, And I think that this is where you see, interestingly, Steve Nash just got the Boston or the Brooklyn Nets job, right? And interestingly, I think he's actually going to be very good because a lot of what I've seen of Steve Nash is I love. I really, really love Steve Nash as a player in terms of his style and also what I've seen of him in terms of the way he tries to teach the game. And he's got a great temperament. But you've seen lots of ex-players who were elite players become coaches didn't always work out. I was not an elite player, not at all. But I've always felt like I have the right temperament and understanding for coaching, which is a degree of patience and connection with kids. And I think that's probably more critical in these early years in particular. So.
Yeah, I agree with you, Vince, because that's been my experience having Mirsad, my hubby, a player. And the way, I mean, he's been coaching and he's coaching the under 19 team, but he also asks me for my advice or eyes on the game, whatever, because I think I see it very differently. He probably sees, he's a little bit sort of boxed in the way he used to play, and he sees it from a player's point of view. Whereas I think someone like myself, who's just had to learn sort of about the game and have an overall view of it, I see things a bit differently, because I must admit, having never played basketball, I thought, oh, how could I ever be a coach? But a mentor quite a few years ago said that's not the case at all. Like, if you understand the game and you have a passion about the connections and the team and that sort of thing, you will definitely have a lot to add.
Yeah, that's really great, because I think one of the things that we've learned so far is that enthusiasm for coaching, just an enthusiasm to be around young people, is probably the number one thing that I look for in coaches. And I've seen that in all of you, which is why I'm excited to have all of you here. But like, enthusiasm to just be in the environment, to want to be around kids, to want to coach them, is like the number one. Teaching you the X's and O's is actually easy. That's the easy part of coach development. The harder part is that sort of like connection with kids. And Tab, like, I saw it from you immediately in that very first session. Like, they loved you. Like, they were so about you, you know? And even if you didn't have a lot of coaching experience, coaching, you can be successful as a coach if you can connect with the kids, and if you want to be there, and you're open-minded to learn the basketball specifics. What we struggle with is when we have the opposite, someone who's an expert in the tactics and the strategy, but then doesn't really do a great job of connecting with kids and creating that environment where they want to be there every day. And we see that all the time. And I've rejected and said no to many coaches who've wanted to be a part of Harbour, who have the basketball knowledge, but have not demonstrated an ability to connect with kids. And so that's really, really crucial. So, okay, so what we'll do is I just want to kind of walk you through what this looks like in practice a little bit more. And so what we mean is this. So the first thing is, we really want to create a sense of belonging, okay? And a sense of belonging is a key need for humans. You want to feel a part of a group. So kids need to feel that they matter to the group, not just that they have opportunity, but they need to feel that they matter, okay? And so how do we do that? How do we create a feeling of mattering? Well, there's two things that are two main things. Number one, in training, we got to give everyone an opportunity in training. You know, like, really, we want an equal opportunity to play, to be a part of games. That means not standing and watching. So what we don't ever want to see is the same kids always out. We don't want to see the same kids always out watching while the better kids are always on the court playing. There are a couple nuances to that. One being that I often do like to do King of the Court, which is a competitive game where the winners stay on. And sometimes that means that the same team might be on for extended periods of time. That is something you have to manage and watch. So if a team is on for too long, we stop them and then they're off. Maybe that means we need to change the teamings to make them more even. And that's where even teams in training and making sure everyone gets meaningful opportunity or equal opportunity on the court is crucial. Games is slightly different. And this is where, you know, the way that I phrase it is we want to give everyone meaningful time in the game. Ideally, particularly in the youngest age groups. So if you're 11 Division II, we want to get as close as possible to equal time. But as we move up and the skill level moves up, we can adjust a little bit. We want meaningful time. So what does that mean? Meaningful time is really everyone plays in every quarter. Definitely everyone plays in every half. Ideally, everyone plays in every quarter. Okay. And as you get towards the end of the game, once everyone has gotten a fairly healthy distribution of opportunity, then kind of towards the end of the game, we can really try to pursue the win. But We don't want to be in a situation where we've got a kid who didn't play at all in the first half and only got in for a minute or two in the second half and then got yanked. That's a recipe for disaster. And in this age group, we should be emphasizing giving kids opportunities to play. Now, if they come on and they're really doing badly, then we might need to take them out and coach them up on some strategies to do better in the game. So we are conscious that if someone is coming on and repeatedly making the same mistakes, repeatedly not playing and making the decisions that we're trying to encourage, well, then we have the authority to say, hey, we've given you an opportunity. Okay, come out, let's talk to you about that. Does that make sense? Does that sound fair? Comments on that? What do you think about that, Junius? Does that seem all right?
Yeah, makes sense. But I do have a question.
Sure.
When you say that for the kids, like for the Division 2, 11 under, we give them like the equal opportunity in terms of the playing time, like in the actual games. What about if, for example, if we are like, if we have a certain player that really like, he's like really into like scoring every position, like, you know, that as a coach, I can feel that if in terms of like, I would hesitate to like, you know, take him off of the game because it's like really playing really well. But some kind, it tells my heart as well, like, oh, I have other players on the bench. That's kind of a struggle for me.
Yeah.
So I'd like to learn more on that and how to manage those.
Well, one of the things about that is we've designed your team so that every team has 2 or 3 strong players. Okay. So every team should not be reliant on one player. Okay. And we've kind of tiered it that way. So every team has, you know, because you do want to be competitive in the game. And I think this is where we're trying to identify that balance. We want to be competitive in the game. We need probably 1 or 2 guys on the court at any given time who can create scoring opportunities for the team. You know, and that often comes through a ball handler who can score or a more athletic player who can get rebounds and put finishes, things of that nature. So we've tried to design the team so that they're all equal in that way. And that's why we do the equal teams, so that all the good players are not kind of concentrated in one team, that they're distributed across the teams. But in terms of like, as the game's going on, this is the gut check as a coach. I've got a kid who's dominating, playing great, but if he never comes out in the first half, only comes out for a minute or 2 in the second half, comes right back in, and every time he's got it, he's scoring. Well, you ask yourself how you would feel if you were watching the game from the sideline and you weren't the coach. You'd probably be like, well, hey, does any other kid get a chance? And we have to be able to do that well. We have to be able to do that well. So, you know, my sense would be that if you're in that situation, you need to kind of organize your subs in such a way that, you know, you always keep 1 player on the court or 2 who can provide you that offense to stay competitive. But as you'll see in terms of our style of play is going to support sharing of the ball. It's going to support taking good shots. It's going to support good basketball. So we won't ever want to be in that situation where we generally are reliant on 1 player all the time. That's not a place we want to be in. Any other thoughts on that? Does that make sense? Cool. I mean, the reality is that kids are not going to get better if they don't have a chance to play. And you need a chance to play. So, but you also, to a degree, and this is at the younger ages, it's slightly different from, say, our 13 Division 1 or Division 2 teams, where if you get into 13 grade, they had more experience. They sort of get it a little bit more. But we do want players to earn time. And you can also lose that privilege if you consistently make certain kinds of mistakes that we've repeatedly been working on and discussing. So for example, if you have a player who consistently drives into tight groups and forces up bad shots and never passes, well, that would be the kind of thing that, to me, that earns you some time on the bench. And we're going to have a conversation about that, you know, because you're not playing the type of way that we want to play. And that's where we find that balance. So it's not just this arbitrary, everyone plays equal. It's, we want to give people equal opportunity, but we also want them to play the right way. And so you have to navigate that as a coach. And we'll have lots of chats over that because I'll be watching all of your games, and we can talk after the games, and we'll notice that it's one or two players who are really thinking about, and then how do we coach that player? Cool.
Yep. So
Okay.
Vince, giving people time in there, because a lot of the kids, like, through the years have always, like, they want to be the starting five.
Yeah.
And I've always sort of said, okay, it depends how we did at practice, your engagement at practice and your effort and whatever. But a lot of the time when you see the opposition take the court or whatever, and you see who's going to do jump ball, everybody wanted to do jump ball, especially in the younger years. Do you give everybody an opportunity, or do you put your strongest or your tallest player, sort of in that situation?
It'd be the jump ball or to start?
Yeah, okay, to start. I mean, like, obviously you try and sort of mix it up so you've got a decent team on the court for your starting five. But just even those, like, special things, like being the person to do the jump ball for the start of the game, surely every kid should have that opportunity. But
I don't have a problem with, like, you guys sorting out this kind of issue on your own. So the only thing that I would say is, like, I like the idea of everyone having a chance to start at least one game during the season. So that to me is fair. I would be cool with the idea of a different person doing the jump ball. That would be the kind of thing that kids would get excited about. Like, I think the benefit of them getting excited about it is probably worth more to us than winning the jump ball. So I would say I would encourage that, like, giving different players an opportunity to do that. I think that there's a degree here of, earning playing time that we have to really kind of watch. I think early in the season, you really need to be much more open about giving everybody a genuinely good opportunity to play and meaningful time. And then as you go and as you start giving feedback to players and we start watching patterns in play and figuring out who does what well, who's maybe really struggling in a certain area, that's when we start having individual conversations. We start kind of, okay, we're going to bring you off the bench so that you don't have the pressure of starting. And then when you come in, because not everybody should start if they come in and they're panicky and they're stressed out. And, so I think it becomes more clear as we go along the season. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Sure.
Yep. Yeah.
Cool.
I think the one thing that I took away, Vince, from what you said too, is you said organization of subs. And I think that's something that with 12 players on an under 11 team, I mean, that's going to be,
it is hard.
Yeah, but it's going to be something you do probably in advance of the game, in your head, or even on paper, to this, how you're going to structure it for the first couple of halves, or first couple of quarters anyways, and
yeah.
I think that's going to be helpful.
Again, with 12 players, everybody needs to play in the first half. That's like rule number one. And when you play, you should probably be getting at least depending on the length of the game, the Friday night games are quite short. The Saturday games are longer. But, you want to get about a 3-minute run at least, and I also I'm a big fan of subbing in pairs or twos or threes. Yeah. I'm not a big 5-in, 5-out fan. I don't really like that. I think that it can create in-group, out-group kind of dynamics, and it also doesn't challenge kids to learn to play with other players. You need to learn to play with other players and let the concepts guide you, not the players on the court. Does that make sense? Totally. So we'll move on to the next piece, which I think is really crucial, and with this concept of sort of teaching through play or learning through play. And it obviously builds on what we've just been talking about. We want to give everybody a chance to play. But the reality is you don't learn unless you have experience making decisions. And basketball is about decision-making. Decision-making is our primary learning focus. We want to develop good decision makers. So not only are kids there because they want to play, but playing. And the way that I frame this, and you can see this here, is we want to develop problem solvers, and our job is to strategically design an environment that teaches basketball problem solving. Okay, this is a really, really important point. Okay, problem solving is this sort of notion of being put in a situation that requires a movement solution. Pass here, run here, jump here, and those things are a combination of instincts and just feel, but also really kind of consciously aware, reading the situation, talking with your team, developing strategies. Sometimes, obviously, we as a coach provide a broader strategy, but what we know and what the research tells us is that the longest term learning comes when the players are able to develop solutions independent of you. And so this is kind of the conceptual frame that we'll talk about in the second section. I'm just going to briefly touch on it here, which is that we want to build our training environment, particularly around the design of the strategic design of learning games that teach problem solving. Those games are built off what we know is going to happen in the full competitive match. So we want to think about the situations that are kind of going to come up on Friday or Saturday. And when we have our training, those are the motivation for the games that we design, right? And so if you think about a game like Italian Drill was a game that's built around transition, right? And that's a common basketball problem that shows up is how do I deal with transition situations where we have an advantage, we have an opportunity to score, or vice versa. We're at a disadvantage, we now need to stop the opposition. And it's a fun game. And so we kind of kill two birds with one stone. We put them in a real game situation, we give them experience and opportunity, and it's fun. And that's that win-win that we're after. I would say that, this concept of rote drills and punishment. So there will be moments where we need to do some drilling. But as you saw from the first training we did, I am a big advocate of small-sided games with some drills that are often more framed as skill challenges. And skill challenges have a target. You're trying to beat a score with a certain amount of time, or you're trying to beat another team. But a rote drill is different because there's not really a decision built into a drill. Decisions or drills tend to be basically the coach tells you the movement, and then you just do what the coach says. Whereas games actually give you the opportunity to make a decision. And that's what we want. We need to give kids the opportunity to make a decision. Does that make sense? Okay. Any comments on that or questions on that? Okay, cool. So I think you'll start to see how these things all like layer onto each other. So this concept of sharing and control, don't micromanage, right? Don't micromanage. So we want to be strategic about when we kind of instruct or when we tell someone what to do. And that's always our last resort. So what we want to do is resist this sort of notion of directly telling them what to do in a situation, or getting them to, because we don't want players to predetermine decisions. Basketball players are reading the game, and we'll talk about that. I mean, that's like everything to us. We want to develop players who can read the game. So they're not going to do that if they've already decided what they are going to do or you've told them what to do, right? Now, that's direct instruction is slightly different from this concept of cueing. Cueing is a word that we use kind of from the sideline that encourages them to play the way we want them to play, but not to actually do a specific act. So for example, a cue like read the court or head up or vision, those are cues that encourage them to make decisions based on what they see, not to make a decision based on what we've told them to do, right? So you have to resist that sort of notion of like, score, like scoring might be the right move, but we don't want them to do it because we've told them to. We want them to do it because it's the right decision for the situation, And so obviously linked into that is the idea that we are not really big on set plays. So we won't spend any time, and I would not encourage you to spend any time on set plays outside of out of bounds play, maybe. But even then we find that in this age group, out of bounds play is not that crucial to the outcome of a game. And the amount of time that you spend trying to get the kids to remember the out of bounds play is probably not as valuable as the time that you would spend teaching them to, read a driving decision, for example. And so we don't encourage set plays outside of maybe one or two later in the year. We don't want to spend any time on that in the first, 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, or even the first month. Really what we want is to design a game that gives kids the opportunity to make decisions, and we cue them from the sideline and we trust that the game has been well designed, and that's going to teach them how to make good decisions. Does that make sense? So we're not error correctors. And it's funny because, there were a few coaches on the first day who, were bringing the group together and were talking a lot. And I think that talking is necessary, but it needs to be reserved for a moment when it's absolutely necessary, right? We want them to play and learn through play. I'll go through a couple more here. And again, stop me if you have any questions or comments as we go through this. When we start thinking about the psychology of the player, when our cues and our system focuses on them playing and making decisions and letting the game be the teacher, what we're doing is we're building what's called a process focus. And process focus is contrasted with an outcome focus. Process focus is focusing on what's within my control. And so when we think about process focus here, I'll give you a really good example. The best idea is to praise decisions, not the result of the decision, right? So for example, if a player were to come down and shoot a shot that we liked, but missed the shot, we would praise that more than a player who took a shot we didn't like and made it, right? So my feedback would be to praise the player who took the shot we liked but missed. Hey, great shot. That's awesome shot. I don't care if you missed. Those are the shots we want. Great job, great decision. Whereas the player who took a really bad shot, made it, I would say, hey, is that the shot that we want? Were you contested? Yes. Is that the kind of shot that we want to shoot as a team? What kind of shots do we want to shoot? So now I'm using questions to probe him to understand that, hey, that's not actually the shot we want. And even though I made it, I need to make a different decision next time. And so that focus on the decision, shot selections is an easy one, and that will be a huge focus for us this year, is really important. Questions are good for provoking a process focus because it gets them to think about a decision. So great questions are really, really good. And the art of coaching is the art of asking good questions, particularly open-ended questions. Hey, go back to that situation. What happened right there? Okay. What did you think right there in that moment? Okay, great. Okay. Would you have done anything differently that time? These sort of open-ended, getting people to reflect and come up with solutions. These are the kind of things that get kids thinking about their process, right? And that encourages that process focus. Whereas if you yell at them for making a turnover, all they're worried about is, I don't want to get yelled at. That's not what we want. And I was that kid I was a 11 or 12-year-old kid who I just didn't want my dad to yell at me. I didn't want my dad to yell at me, and I would get nervous every time I made a mistake because I didn't want him to yell at me. And my dad didn't know better. He was like most, folks who were doing their thing. Does that make sense? Yeah. Any comments on that? What does that make you think about, Corey?
Well, I think even in, think about a left-hand layup with the under 11 kids, and that when we're drilling that through them, and, I prefer to cheer on their proper footwork and trying it with their left hand and them actually making it with their right, on that side of the hoop in training, it's a great time. So I think that came to mind and was an opportunity to do that, but yeah, totally on board with this for sure.
Cool. Tab, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I don't have any comments, so yeah.
Okay. Ange, what do you think?
Sorry, there's two of us fighting over this computer now. Yes, it's, yeah. No, just what you were saying about you only use words when sort of absolutely necessary and do the more questions. That's something I do need to work on because I probably am too wordy and quick to correct. I found it's worked because I've had a relationship, especially with my intermediate team, so they kind of know what I expect in training. So on the court, they've probably got my voice going through their head. But yeah, no, really, I will take that on board just to tone it down a bit.
and I mean, like if you're if you're carrying a positive demeanor and you generally have a good environment and they trust you, like part of what I think does happen is once you build the connection, to your point, with players, they're more willing to take on board direct instruction and error correction. We just never want to, we just don't want to start with that as our primary mode, you know, like we want to work our way to that point where it's like a player comes in and you're like, hey, listen, we've been coaching, we've been going for a month now. You know, I love your game, but you're turning the ball over too much. You need to stop turning the ball over, you know, and that's where you can kind of get into that let's start, you know, we always want to maintain a high standard, but when it gets personal and start working with the individual player on what they need to be doing differently, you know, we want to work our way to that by building this positive environment. Kids want to be there. Kids are excited. They feel that they have an opportunity. And I think that's just sort of a general feel, you know, we don't want to get bogged down in doing things perfectly at the beginning. We want to work our way to that. So we do kind of have this approach that's more global, that gets narrow and specific over time. So once you get to the like end of a season, you're going to be way more specific and nuanced in the technical details. But at the beginning, it's about global kind of concepts, you know, get a great shot and, you know, move the ball and play really hard defensively and apply pressure. As we go along, there'll be a technical thing that they need to correct. And as it really reappears more and more and more, you know, like you're opening the gates, you're just letting them go around you. Hey, come on, you need to be better at that. We do know that kids want to be held to a standard, but it's one of those classic things of they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And so you want to kind of use that as your foundation. Establish, I care about you, I'm here, I want you to have a good experience. As we go along, we'll start working through all the nuance.
Yes. As a young coach, I don't really have, you know, I don't really know a lot of like 11-year-olds or anyone that like around that age. So like I kind of have this fear coming into this team. Like, you know, the first time I had training, it was kind of hard to control them because like, you know, I was friendly with them, they were friendly with me. But I feel like as we go on, I feel like, I don't know, I feel like I'll be too nice. Like I don't want to hurt their feelings or anything. Because there was already this one kid that was already like crying on the sidelines because like he wasn't getting the ball much because he was a small kid and like quiet. So I didn't really know how to treat that.
Yeah.
Like I was telling the other kids to like pass the ball to him, but like they wouldn't really listen to me. I just don't know how to like deal with that type of situation.
Yeah. Anyone want to comment on that, or thoughts or reactions to that? Because I think that's a really good.
Hey Vince, Jenny here. So I've got the same experience back in the intermediate school that I'm coaching. So obviously in a team, there's going to be one or two that are really experienced, really strong. And then there are like some team where there's not so experienced player. So at times when they break the play or the scoring, they don't trust that person to actually to make the shot or to make the play. So as a result, they don't pass the ball. So sometimes I just tell them, like, you're gonna need to improve as a team. So if only you are improving and not the other person, then we're not improving as a team. That means we're not gonna win as a team. We're just gonna win as just one person. And as you can see in the NBA, even if like one or two players are really strong, they don't win championship. But the team that actually have like team plays that actually win championship in the NBA.
Yeah, I think the other thing, just to add to that, is that with your team, as you get to know them, there's going to be leaders, even at under 11, that understand the importance of sharing the ball. And the importance of team, and there are these amazing kids that have those qualities almost inbuilt, and you'll figure out who they are, and then it's real easy to kind of put the kid that was on the side with that kid for the next 3-on-3, let's say king of the court, and all of a sudden he hits the shot and his teammates see it and that trust level in him builds. So I think that's one way to kind of to work your way through those situations. Like, you don't know, I mean, week one, we're all learning who these kids are, like it, but you know, as you grow with your team, I think that's something that you'll find.
Yeah, that's actually helpful. Yeah, that sounds good.
what I would add is two things. One of the things is that having been as a young coach in a very similar situation as UTAB, where I was probably I was overly nice as a young coach.
Yeah, yeah.
Too nice. I was afraid of holding players to a high standard because I didn't want them to not like me. And
Yeah, yeah.
I think in this environment, as much as I'm sort of saying, hey, we want to create this positive environment, we want kids to want to be there. That really comes by creating opportunities to play. That should all be couched in an understanding that as a coach, I set the boundaries for behavior. So I have to establish what are my boundaries, what are my lines that I don't want players to go off. And they need to be reasonable, right? And these are reasonable things. Like if you really ask yourself, when I put a kid into a sporting team, I'm obviously I want them to play the game, but I'm also looking for the structure that sport provides. And so people management and my ability to manage people is crucial. What does that mean in practice? Well, what it means is that you are allowed to set basic expectations for how kids interact with each other. But you just need to know what are sort of like hard and fast lines and what needs to be developed over time. So something like teamwork is something you're going to develop over time. Something like respect for authority. So for example, not talking when I'm talking, not dribbling when I'm talking, sprinting to the group when I blow the whistle. Those are the kind of things that we want everybody to do because that's basic respect for the group. But then when it comes to things like sharing the ball, well, it's really hard. Some kids are just so used to shooting every time and they're so young, they don't really understand teamwork yet in that way. So you have to figure out your voice as a coach, which is how do I communicate to the group my expectations for how they're going to play with each other? And is that me making a comment in a huddle? Is that me designing a game that forces them to play the way we want them to play? Because those are the two things I'm thinking about. One is if a team has won without passing to one of their teammates, I'm going to bring them together, the whole group together, and I'm going to say, hey, listen, great that, the basketball is starting to look better, but I'm not happy with the fact that in some of these teams, not everyone is touching the ball. Basketball is a team game. We need to share the ball. If I see that, I'm going to be unhappy. And even just that little threat of unhappiness, can kind of, oh, wow, yeah, we didn't do that, and I expect you to cheer each other on. When someone makes a good play or when someone makes the right decision, we should be cheering each other on. If you guys lose the game, you should be coming out of the game, high-fiving each other, telling each other, good job. Like you can set those kinds of behavioral expectations. You don't necessarily have to make them run for not doing it, but I think that these kids tend to be responsive to their coaches who are clear and consistent in their expectations. Just make sure they're reasonable, don't expect a 12-year-old to do what a 17-year-old should do, That sound fair?
Thank you. Yeah, that sounds really good.
Cool. All right, we're almost done with this section and then we'll take a short break. I do want to say this, in this kind of concept of doing this process focus where we're challenging kids we were focusing more on the decisions that they make and the way they play, not necessarily the outcomes, right? We need to model that. And so what does that mean? Number one, do not get caught up in officials. Okay, and I will say this now and I will say this repeatedly. The officiating, we are in a development space with officiating. So officials are often young. They're often the same age sometimes of the players that they're coaching or maybe slightly older. When we get consumed by officials' calls that we disagree with, then we are not modeling a process focus. We're getting consumed by the outcome, by something that is outside of our control. So as a coach, you need to accept the fact that there's going to be bad calls in the game, and you need to focus more on encouraging the players to respond appropriately to bad calls, which is what is a healthy response to a bad call. It's run down the other side of the court and focus on defense or whatever's coming next. So not getting caught up in the outcome that's one of the really key ways that we need to make sure that we ourselves are focusing on process. What do I say to my players to help them respond well to a bad call or a call we disagree with? The other team is scoring. we're playing poorly. I'm going to bring them into the timeout. What am I going to say to them that encourages a process focus? Like, let me ask you this question. If you think about a coach who's too focused on outcome, what are they going to say to their team in the huddle? What are they going to do to them? Or maybe what is an experience of a coach who is way too, focused on that? What's a coach, what have they done?
Shout out a player. When the plays didn't happen, shout out player. I'm even scared sometimes.
Yeah, like you're gonna let them have it, right? Like you're gonna tell them off. I mean, and the concept of like, this is such a New Zealand thing of like telling your team off. I told them off for how they were playing. Like that's such a thing, and I'm not a fan of it, like outside of, again, absolutely necessary instances. Like for me, the only time I'm telling a team off is if I feel like they're not taking the game seriously, in the sense of they're not playing to compete. And we are there to compete. And so if kids are like not jogging back on defense, if kids are just shooting the first random shot, or, shooting half court shot in a game, like things of that nature, like we're here to play basketball. We are here to play genuine basketball. So I want you to take the game seriously. But if we're taking the game serious, we're just playing poorly, or we're making mistakes, then when we come in, I need to figure out a way to get you to shift your mindset to the decisions and the behaviors and the habits that are promotive of good basketball, right? And so that's going to be, those, we'll talk about what those things are, but that's where I want to be. My job is to help you frame your approach such that you're focusing on things within your control that help us play good basketball, right? Sprint back on defense, contest every shot, if you're play with your head up, read the court, like we want to end our timeouts with clear, actionable behaviors that actually promote good basketball. And that is really key. That's really, really, really key. We'll talk about that, I think, in the next section as well. Because ultimately, how we play is more important than if we win or lose. And if we're doing our play right, we will win.
So Vince, would it be appropriate, because I've often used this with my team, so if we do have a timeout and I call them in and I say, if you still want to win this game, you need to stick to your player, be on the right side of whatever I've noticed. Mm-hmm. Do you think you shouldn't sort of say that? Because I almost want them to have that motivation, that they don't feel, this game is out of our reach. So that I say, if you want to win this game, you need to do this. You know what I mean? It's still within your reach type of thing.
It's a really interesting thing. I don't know if you guys know who Matt Lacey is, but Matt Lacey is the Rosamini boys senior head coach. He's a New Zealand coach. He was the National Coach of the Year, Basketball New Zealand. He coaches in our program, coaches our 19 boys team. And what I always liked about Matt was that if the team was winning and they weren't playing our way, he would call a timeout and he would let them know, right? And he'd say, we're not playing hard. We're not, contesting every shot. We're not sprinting back on defense. Yeah, we're up, but we're not playing our way. And so the reason why I bring that up is because what we don't want to do is get consumed by this idea that, and maybe that's the wrong way to phrase it. I don't think you're being consumed by it, but you're kind of using the win as the hook or as the carrot, when realistically what the hook or carrot should be, hey, like, we want to play good basketball, and, we could be doing, I would probably say that we could be doing much better, or we could be playing much better if we were doing these things, and they know everybody's there to win, like in the sense of everyone is competing and playing to win, right? And we do play to win. We don't play to lose in that sense, but it's always couched within the context of winning could be the outcome if we play this particular way, and this is the standard. Because really, I would argue that what kids want is to be in the game playing well. That's actually what the kids at the end of the day want. They want to be in the game. No one wants to really be on the bench watching, and they want to be playing well, because playing well is what they're after, to be excelling in an endeavor with other people that builds community and connection and gives you a sense of status. And I think that's kind of a bit more of what kids are actually after. They want to have this meaningful role in a good team that's playing well. Like that's probably actually success for most of us in basketball. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yeah.
I've got to put my hand up there, Vince, and say some of that might be my faults as well. having been coached probably a bit like you, where when I call a timeout for my teenage team, I'm often the first thing I say is, "Look, do you guys still want to win this game?" But you're right; it's kind of it's a bit of a kick and not a carrot in a way, isn't it?
Yeah.
In a roundabout way, you're correct. Yeah.
It's just about, I mean, if you're being conscious about how you talk about winning, then that's the first thing. Like, I don't want to get too consumed by, you're not allowed to say this, you're not allowed to say that. There are a few things I don't want us to say, but there aren't too many of them. Like, I think that most of what we're talking about is, like, how are we sort of framing success? What is success for our team today at this training, at this game on the weekend, and for this season? And Harbour is quite clear. Like for us, success is retention for this age group. We want kids to come back next year, and we want them to play the season out. That's the first element of success. The second is we want to see kids playing better basketball at the end of the year than they did at the beginning. So what does that mean? Well, I'm going to walk you very specifically through what that means, right? It's shot selection, it's style of it's ball player movement, it's, defensive pressure and making the opposition have to work hard to score and being a team that helps when needed. And those things are actually quite easy to see. We won't see a lot of it at the beginning of the year because most kids are not really there yet. But by the end of the year, we will want to see improvements there. And so if you've got those two things for us, kids want to come back next year and they've gotten better, man, that's a win. Winning championships and things of that nature can be couched within certain groups. We'll send a team, like we send teams in this age group to a tournament in Melbourne most years. We probably won't do it this year, but we send a top 13s team to Melbourne, and I'll show you some video of that tournament. And we want to play better every year there. We want to finish at a higher rank than we did the year before. We've started to kind of do that. But again, like winning is sort of a feedback on how well we're doing. If we're doing all these other things well, then winning will be a natural outcome of that. And I mean, who doesn't like winning? Like, it's not like you don't like winning, but you just have to frame it healthy. Cool? Okay. I think that's the last slide for that section. Does anyone have any more other comments or questions about that before we take our first break?
No, I'm good.
Cool. Perfect. I'm on time, so I'm going to give you 5 minutes. Use the toilet, get a coffee or tea. We'll start at 2:25. I've got 2:19, so yeah, 2:25. Does that sound okay?
Yep.
Cool.
All right, sweet. Okay, so our next section is a bit more, we started diving a little bit more into kind of specifics, particularly around training design. And I'm conscious that sort of like quite a bit of our time is obviously spent in games, but training is really the heart of what we do. And training is where you build your foundations. We train more than we play. So we will play, I think this year what we're looking at, and just so you guys have a bit of a sense for how things are going to unfold moving forward, we are still looking at a very comprehensive season. And in fact, we think that by pushing the year into November, we can get more games and trainings than we originally had promised. So we actually think we'll be able to offer more. We're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of, I think, 15 training sessions that we think we can still provide. Don't quote me on that, but 10 games, kind of 15 trainings. It's a lot of basketball. And it's these trainings in particular, these Sunday trainings where there are multiple teams, they're just such a big, high energy environment. It builds a lot of community. training is really important to us. And if you do training well, then games are easy. Because in this age group, the basketball is so simple in the sense of what you need to do to really play well. The basketball is really simple. It's very basic, but they're new and they're young and they haven't really figured out how to play yet. So there's a learning curve. And what we've got to do is be really good at kind of, we've gotten better at accelerating the learning curve for any new player or any young player who's still trying to figure out how to play good basketball. And that really comes through effective game design. And so that's what we're going to talk about here. I'll just kind of frame it this way, though. So Rampage is a model. It's actually come out fairly recently. It's part of a LTAD framework. So LTAD is long-term athlete development. So this is really our sports scientists and our athlete development researchers and experts have kind of canvassed all of the research and told us that a really effective development session looks like this. You begin your session by raising the body's core temperature. That's usually through some kind of dynamic movement. It could be, your kind of traditional dynamic high knees and skips and lunges and, slides and back pedals and things of that nature. It could also be games. It could be tag. It could be an obstacle course. It could be a relay race. It tends not to be at full speed, so it tends to be about 50 to 70%, somewhere in that range. But we want to get the body's core temperature, and that only should take about 5 minutes to do. Activate. A lot of researchers are now encouraging youth development programs to spend some time really working on mobility and strength in warm-up. So activate is this idea that we're going to put you through movement patterns almost as like a body weight strength circuit type of thing. And this is kind of the way that we've interpreted it, that we want to activate the hips and the glutes. We want to put all of the joints through their full ranges of motion. And we can probably spend 5 to 10 minutes doing this if we're really efficient in our time. And this would be, us maybe having kind of like pods of 3 or 4 and us giving them a very short, quick circuit to do. It might be like a plank. It might be some squats, some body weight squats. It might be some single leg toe touches. These kinds of things that are working on making sure that the joints and the muscles are ready for competition, but you need your body temperature raised to be able to go through full range of motion. Don't get too caught up in this side of it because we'll be providing a lot of guidance in terms of that. And often if I'm there, I'll probably be putting the group through something like that. But this is just information for you to think about, particularly in the other teams that you go to outside of Harbour. And also for maybe you, as we go along, designing warm-ups that are really, really good for getting the body ready for competition and training. After you've kind of raised the temperature, activated, mobilized, you want to get into a preparatory activity. And preparation is really a sport-specific activity that gets them going at full intensity that requires skills. And so that could be like layup lines, for example, full speed layup lines. That could be a shooting competition. So if you think about some of the games, you recall that the last training we did, scramble shooting was a game that we played at the beginning. That would be that would be kind of in that prepare phase as well. But really it was layups. If we're thinking about layups, were like the way to get us doing basketball stuff. And ideally this is some kind of early kind of skill challenge. I like the concept of a skill challenge that challenges them to apply sport specific skills at full intensity. Activity is where we start getting into, I think, the decision-making side of things. There's a tactical emphasis. So again, keep away is probably the one that I like the most in this space because it's a game that now is taking the next level from prepare. We're actually doing basketball specific skill development with a tactical focus. Okay. That all of that is, should take 30 minutes. Okay. And maybe 45, depending on how many prepare and sort of early activities you do. The heart of our training is small-sided games, okay? And that's what we're really going to talk about here. Small-sided games are the, the full manifestation of everything, your body's readiness to play, your tactical readiness, and it is the focus of the training session. So for us, that was, if you recall, that last training we did 3-on-3, and we did 3-on-3 in a half court, and then we did 3-on-3 in Italian drill. And that combination is the heart of the training. Lots of play, high intensity, rules specifically designed to promote certain kinds of decisions and certain kinds of learning. And that will go, ideally at the end of every session, you have some time to evaluate the session. Okay, and that means bringing the group together, having a chat. What did we work on today? What did you guys take away? Give them some feedback, talk about what's happening next session or next game. Does that make sense as a kind of a framework for how to do this? Just stop me if you have questions, okay? I've sent out this document to all of you already. This is kind of designing a training session. So if you look at kind of the way that this works, you know, we start with an introduction, we bring everybody together, we have a quick chat, here's kind of where we're at today, we go through our warm-up process. Okay, now some of this is, you know, warm-up and skill challenges. Again, this should align with that early part of the Rampage model. And, you know, this is, again, like particularly the skill challenges, lots of different ways to do this. As we'll see, the goal is to try to make them as relevant to the game as possible while also keeping it fun and full intensity. So, you know, everything that we do, to me, like, if you design your training well, kids are having fun and they're playing really hard. They're playing really hard. We never want to sacrifice effort. We want everybody to play really hard. And that comes by challenging kids appropriately. We like challenges. Kids love challenges. If you play sports, it's because you like being challenged. And you want to have to exhibit skill. In terms of, you know, the small-sided games, I do like to kind of play kind of some kind of version of 2-on-2, 3-on-3 first, and then at the end of training, I do like to spend some time, depending on the age group, in some kind of full court stuff. If 5-on-5 is appropriate, then we will do 5-on-5. But as you'll see, sometimes that's 3-on-3 or 4-on-4, depending on numbers. If we don't have numbers for 5-on-5 or the numbers are awkward, we might do different versions. I think that we've learned very quickly what good rules are, and this is what kind of the art of this is, really designing good rules. But there's a lot of support for this, and this is the new wave of teaching and learning that's been kind of slowly developing over the last probably 20 years. And one of the reasons why I moved to New Zealand is because New Zealand is one of the leading places for research on skill acquisition and learning in sport and physical education. And I came to learn a lot of this material. So one group that's done a really good job of, I think, articulating this is this guy named Chris Oliver. And I'm not sure if you guys know Chris Oliver. He is Canadian. He runs the Basketball Immersion platform. So I'm just going to show you 2 videos, and then we'll have a chat about it. So maybe as you go through this, maybe start kind of jotting down some notes or some questions, anything that kind of pops out to you, reactions, anything, because we want to have a chat about it after this.
Teaching out of 3-on-3 sequences can be an effective way to develop decision-making and game applications. In this video example, you can see how 3-on-3 sequences are used in practice to transfer the same technical and tactical skills to 5-on-5 practice and game applications. The 3-on-3 sequences begin with a pass to the post. This initiates a post-feed reaction sequence. Even though the post-reaction sequence is a pattern, the decisions that result from the initial pin screen are not. After the post feed, there are no predetermined decisions. There are basic concepts that happen if the ball is in a certain spot, but players are allowed the freedom to read defensive coverages and matchups and make decisions. Three-on-three teaching not only increases the decision-making and skill application opportunities for your players, but also the number of teachable situations for you as a coach. Use your coaching interventions to teach within the game sequences. sequences that develop what you do in 5-on-5. The art and science of coaching is to determine if what you are spending time developing in practice is actually translating into game success. If the 3-on-3 teaching does not transfer to 5-on-5 in practice and in games, then it is not effective. Choose 3-on-3 sequences that come directly from what you do on offense or what you need to defend on defense.
Okay, initial reactions to that. Does that make sense, what he's saying? Kind of how he's doing that? Corey, what do you think? Does that make sense? It would probably align with what we've already been doing, though. Hey.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, man, I think so. I guess I saw these when you sent them through originally, and definitely aligning with what we're doing in training, which is cool.
Yeah.
My question, I guess, would be, knowing under 11 kids or under 13 kids, there's a fundamental component to some of those movements, basketball movements, that we all kind of know, like an up screen or a down screen, or, and then how they roll off that movement. And so where does that fall into, like, this whole rampage? Because that takes time in some regards, right? Like, they can learn, we can show it, and
perfect question. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect question. And to be clear, we're not telling you to go into your 11 and under training and start with a post entry.
No.
Right. So
yeah, for sure.
That's not appropriate for this grade. The concept is that we want to design a 3-on-3 or 2-on-2 or 1-on-1, whatever we see in the game, whatever situations we come up in the game, which tend to be small-sided versions of the full game. If you think about 5-on-5 is really a kind of web of 2-on-2s and 3-on-3s and 1-on-1s and 2-on-1s and 1-on-2s and 3-on-2s, right? Like it's very rarely all 5 players literally engaged at the same time. You often have, 2 offense and 2 defense, or 3 offense and 2 defense on a strong side and everyone else on the weak side. And so because or even in transition, you're rarely going to have all 5 players in transition in the same space at the same time. You often have 2 guys have leaked out, 1 player's gotten back, 2 players are advancing. So now we're in a 3-on-2 or a 2-on-1 situation. So the idea is to catalog these situations in our mind that are coming up in the game. They're already happening. You just need to figure out how they happen at your context in your grade, right? So in youth basketball, what we see quite often is there are lots of 1-on-1s. So to be honest, 1-on-1 is, we should be playing a lot of 1-on-1 in our grade, because a lot of the basketball is me driving on my opponent. Maybe having a weak side defender who comes over to help, and what does his player do? And as we kind of like develop and evolve this, what we find is that the game reveals the skill tendencies, both in terms of the strengths and the weaknesses. So often a criticism of small-sided games is that, players need the skill to be able to do it. And to a degree, that's true. But your job as the coach, and we've done this long enough to know how to do this well, is that your job as a coach is to figure out how to make the game work for everybody based on their skill level. So if players don't know, have the experience to do a post-entry pass into a backstream, we don't do that, because it's not something that they know how to do yet. But if they were ready for that and we wanted to introduce them to that, then we would do that. But we would obviously do it at an older age. Most likely the game at this age is drive and kick. That's what the game is at this age. It's drive and kick or pass and cut. And most every kid in this program is either already knows how to do that and just needs to be reinforced to do that as a winning strategy, or is ready to learn that. And that's why we have basketball at this age, is because they're ready to learn the basics of basketball. So 2-on-2, we really want players to drive to the basket and either shoot a layup or kick out to a teammate. And we want the person guarding the ball to simply slide and stay in front and not let them score, not let them get a layup. And we want the defense on the weak side to not hug their man. That is probably going to be 90% of what we try to get these kids to figure out this year. Like if you really, really break it down to its basics. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. The harder part will be getting kids who have a weak left hand to drive going left. That's the core. I would say that's a really, really key issue. And then the other one being, is a player capable to catch and shoot an open jump shot? And that's where initially we're praising decisions. But then as we learn, okay, our team is really weak going to their weak hand, we build our skill challenges early in the session to build that up. Right? We work on left-hand layups. We work on driving left. We play one-on-one where we value left-hand layups more than right-hand layups. So I've been doing lots of things recently of like, let's play one-on-one in pods of 3 or 4 or 5. And in those pods, we're playing king of the court. So you stay on if you score. First person to 5 wins. 1 point for a right-hand layup, 2 points for a left-hand layup. Now you're using a game to work on something that's occurring in the 5-on-5 game and is going to make them better as a player. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Other thoughts or questions about that?
Vince, I have a quick question.
Yes.
So, based on my experience, like coaching like let's say 15 players, I mean, not on the practice, like example, you have more than 15 players. What we do, I mean, in my previous basketball club, which I was engaged, is we do a rabbit drill. Because sometimes when we do like 2-on-2 or 3-on-3, sometimes other kids just kids like 11 or sometimes 10, they just play around, like they don't listen, they just mucking around. So what we want, because is just to engage them, all of them, so that's why we design, we use the rabbit drill, because they make them like a rabbit drill, all of them, like you have to wait for your turn to jump in on the court. You play defense, you play offense. So that's what I have experienced, but I'm quite interested to do this as well in terms of like your 2-on-2, 3-on-3, 4-on-4. So in Harbour. So
yeah, I also wouldn't disagree with the use of the rabbit drill. That sounds like an engaging game. I've done the rabbit type games because they're pretty realistic. Like you got trailing defenders, like it's pretty quick, like on, off, you're playing at pace, at speed. Like I'm with that. I think that any game is as good as your ability to push the right buttons that keep people engaged and challenge their skill. So 2-on-2 is no good if you're like, okay, let's play 2-on-2, and you don't design any rules around it. So you don't come up with creative ways to start the game or creative ways to end the game. You don't come up with creative scoring systems that challenge them and that get them excited. You maybe don't have the right groups together where players are playing against players of similar ability or size or skill. And that's your challenge as a coach. Because to me, 2-on-2, there's nothing inherently about 2-on-2 that says kids are going to muck around. It's all about how you have introduced 2-on-2 and how you are framing it as a skill challenge. Keeping in mind that I would argue that any game is going to work if you do it for the right amount of time. So there are games that we can stay with too long. So if we stay with games too long, we need to be monitoring engagement. These kids are young. They can't stay focused all the time. So let's make sure that we're monitoring engagement. But then let's also structure it in a way where, it's got good games have clearly defined outcomes. Okay, this is really crucial. A good game, there's a clear winner and loser of the game. So that's why, I like to play to a score. Almost every game I do, we play to a score. First team to 10, first team to 5, first team to 3. Because you're competing. That's what keeping score. I am not one of those people who believes that we shouldn't keep score in youth sports. I think that scores are important because they give feedback on how well we're playing. And so we build score into our competition and training. It's more how we react to losing or winning that's important, So we don't want teams to gloat when they win. We don't want teams to become, really sad when they lose. It's like, just Okay, you lost. Next game. So it's really about designing the game well. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah. I've got another one where Chris goes a little bit more into depth and uses a youth example. So some of you may have already seen this, but we'll show this again. Oh, whoops.
3-on-3 with a post allows your team to work on post-reaction sequences with a focus on the perimeter action. After the initial post entry and pass out of the post, the coach steps out of the drill. 3-on-3 small-sided games give players more opportunities to touch the ball while opening up space to try new things and build confidence when doing so. They also provide a player more opportunities to build more diverse skills and versatility on offense and defense. Here are some practical examples of different ways to play 3-on-3 to develop your team's offensive and defensive skills. Three-on-3 two trips allows your team to play competitively in both half-court and full-court situations. 3-on-3 two trips allows your team to play competitively in both half-court and full-court situations. It allows your team to work on transition defense and offense, and also, if you wish, to be able to add different types of pressure defensive situations to be able to develop your team against pressure and putting on pressure. As a coach, you can set the initial offensive sequence to develop your offense or to work on a specific defensive situation. As your team progresses in their learning, you should provide them with multiple options to run on offense. This makes your 3-on-3 games more random and variable. If you practice the same sequence over and over again, your team will know what is coming. Instead, we want to stimulate thinking on every possession to simulate the randomness and unpredictability of games.
One of the things I really like about Chris and his emphasis in training is being creative in how you enter into the situation. So think about traditional 3-on-3, right? And whether or not it's actually representative or translates. Now, we did some traditional 3-on-3. We check the ball at the top. We have them play kind of spread out. How often does that happen in the game where we actually play 3-on-3 in the whole half court? It doesn't, right? Like it really doesn't. Now it would happen in transition, maybe a 3-on-2 with a trailing defender, and maybe there's a brief moment in early offense where we could do something. We used it as an introduction, right? We used it as a way to just get them playing, not focusing too much on things. But as we go along, what we want to do is we want to mix up our use of 3-on-3 to make it game-like. So how would we do that? Well, one example is, I don't know if you noticed in this with these boys, this last image, they're only playing on the right side of the court, right? So they're not actually playing on the left side of the court. And by playing only on the right side of the court, you're actually acknowledging that there's a weak side and you're trying to play 3-on-3 on the strong side. Now, obviously, sometimes even 3-on-3 on the strong side maybe hurts our spacing, but 2-on-2 on the strong side certainly wouldn't. 1-on-1 on one side certainly wouldn't, you know? And so like changing the court dimensions is a really smart way of doing it. What if you also, instead of starting on just a normal check, what if you started on an inbounds pass from the sideline? Inbounds passing is one of the main ways we create turnover. We lose the ball. We are terrible. We were terrible last year at inbounds passing. We have so many turnovers. And that's like one of my number one things this year. We need to do more small-sided games off inbounds pass from the sideline or the baseline. Because our kids have not figured out how to get open and how to pass under pressure in an inbound situation. It probably is easily in this grade, 5 turnovers a game. Easy. So if we practice that in the game, where all we're doing is playing, you know, layup or jump shot, start on an inbounds pass. If you score, you stay on. Well, hey, that's a pretty good kind of game. You know, 2-on-2 on one half of the court. You simply, you know, you literally out of bounds is the far side of the key. You know, that's kind of the thinking that we want to start moving towards. What do you think about that, Ange?
To mix it up, as you say, the entry point, because that is the sticking point, because nothing will happen.
That's right.
So I quite like that. Yeah.
And so you're just designing rules and designing the game. So think about entry point, you think about scoring system, right? So value the shots you want to get, undervalue the shots you don't want to get. And I'll show you a few examples of that as we go. Court dimensions, number of players. What about simply playing advantage, disadvantage game? 2 players on offense, 1 on defense. Okay, now offense, that happens in games all the time. How do you make it as game-like as possible? Well, you probably might give it a shot clock. You have 5 seconds to score, 2-on-1 situation. You can only make 1 pass. You should be able to get a layup in that, but you got to do it quick, and you got to figure out how to do it, you know? Or the opposite, 2-on-3. Off defense doubles the ball. Okay, now you guys are at a disadvantaged situation. How are you going to play out of that? You got to be able to step through a double. You got to be able to step through a double team. You got to be able to find an open teammate. You got to be aggressive to score. You got to find your advantage. You know, these are the kind of things that we do. Now we play a lot. One of the games that I highly encourage is and we may not be able to do it in our typical Sunday trainings just because of the numbers, but I'm a big fan of 3-on-3-on-3, and that's what they were playing that last game. 3-on-3-on-3 is a really, really good game. And the reason it's a really good game is because particularly the way that we often do it is with a shot clock, often probably a 10 or a 14-second shot clock once they cross half court. You play offense to score. If you score, you got to take the ball out of bounds against the team you just scored on. So now you're working on 2 things, scoring and then inbounding against full court pressure, which is a really common problem for this age group, is inbounding against full court pressure. And it's something that we need to get way better at as a program. And then if you beat them across half court, then they can no longer play. They just wait, and then you go play against the other team that's waiting on the other side of the court. And you repeat the same structure. And that kind of a game creates a nice cycle of obviously you need to score to keep the ball, but then you can't relax just because you scored. You then have to advance. And that creates that natural cycle of score, take the ball out of bounds, try to score. Does that make sense? Yeah. So if we just go through a few of these concepts, part of what we're trying to do is find the right game. And there's a concept called flow, which is really crucial. Really, it's just to say that when your skills meet the challenge, you are in an optimal level of engagement, okay? And you'll see kind of from this graph, like this flow state is what we want to be in, okay? Anxiety is the result of challenge, overwhelming skill, right? So I'm low skill and I'm high challenge, I'm gonna create stress. Too hard, game's too hard. And we don't create hard game, you have to monitor, is the game too hard? Whereas there's the opposite that can occur. If the game's too easy, then kids can get bored. And so you've got to constantly monitor that. And the same game could go from anxiety producing, then you make some rule adjustments, then kids are in flow, and then they get bored of it because they figured out the game and they've figured out how to play it. So then you got to then mix it up again, make it harder, So you're always in this dance of adjusting the games, make it harder, make it easier. Okay, hey, new rule. And if you spend any time with me in training, I'm always coming up with new rules. New rule. Got to score this way. Can't do this. Dribble limit, pass limit. Have to score this way. Have to start this way. And that's what makes the game exciting. And then you do it in 2-on-2 and 3-on-3, and then you work it up to 5-on-5. And we do the same thing in 5-on-5. The 5-on-5 challenges look different. It might be, if we're playing 5-on-5 full scrimmage, the challenge might be more of like, okay, you can only score these ways, but you have to start this way. And you only have this much time. And so that's where it's like, we want them to get them to play fast, and we want them to do that. Tab, I hear you shaking your head. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm just noting stuff down. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Okay. Just to kind of walk you through a few of these things, when we think about the concept of modified games, we also can think about it in terms of equipment modifications. Now, it's just this is a tennis example. Like obviously they've got smaller court sizes, they've got lower nets, the balls and the rackets are going to be smaller. We're adapting the game to meet the kids where they are. And this is what's crucial. This is the major concept I want you to understand. With in mind the kind of skill we want them to develop. This is an example of an under 14 game. This is one-on-one in pairs. A very simple game, so basic, but really important for what we're going to want kids to learn. Play one-on-one, coming down the baseline, obviously like out of bounds, and now offensively, can you beat a player with limited space? And defensively, can you slide and make them take as many dribbles as possible, or maybe even force a turnover? You know, and then usually what happens is, I think the way that this game was designed, this game was played in channels down the side of the court, but once they reached the 3-point line, the entire court was open to them. So then that's fairly game-like. So coming down this channel, getting to this point, and then it's open-ended, try to score. And that's a game that we would often do with a whole group here, pairs here, and one group's going this way and the other group's going this way. Great game. Great game. Building one-on-one ball handling against pressure, building individual defense. Hard, tiring, very tiring. This is an under 10 game where the object is, we're giving, I think, an advantage to the offense. So offense basically is in red. They spin the ball to themselves. Defense starts sort of behind them. They spin the ball to themselves. They sprint, they catch it, and then they attack. The rule is that they need to go between one of the two cones, one of the two sets of cones. Why do you think, what is that working on? What would you say that's working on?
Using the lanes to get to the hoop. Like,
yes.
Properly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Defense obstacles.
They are defensive obstacles. Yep. The player has the choice. This is really, though, an offensive drill where the offense, and these are 10-year-olds, right? So we want to teach 9 and 10-year-olds a very basic thing, which is look while you're dribbling and pick a gap, right? So it's actually very, very basic. All we want you to do is have your head up and then at full speed be able to choose one of the gaps with a player chasing you. And then just try to score. So again, that's where we're kind of, this is the kind of thinking, right? We're designing games around skills we want to learn. This is an under 16 game. I really liked this game. This is 2-on-2 in the half court. The offensive rule is that offense can only catch the ball outside of the 3-point line. Okay. Defense is simply told, try to keep offense outside of the key, but play them square. What do you think this is working on offensively and defensively? Could throw out a guess. No
I'd
wrong.
say like help side defense for sure for your off-ball defender. Maybe.
Yep. Maybe.
I don't know. Spacing.
Spacing. Okay. What do you mean?
Meaning that we're gonna have enough space to create an offense, so we start beyond the arc, so that there's enough space, so we can strategize how we're gonna score or do offensive.
So if we think about, it's obviously takes away certain things. So what is this taken away? But what is it open? Every rule takes something away and opens something else up. So what are we taking away from offense by saying that they can only catch the ball outside the 3-point line?
An inside like post pass or something like that.
Post pass?
Yeah.
What else? Cuts, right?
Yeah,
no cuts. So there's no basket cuts, there's no backdoor cuts, things of that nature. Now, by taking that away, post up is a really good example. So Tab, by taking away the post up, you've opened up something else, which is what?
Driving lane.
Driving lane, correct. So when we get really clumped spacing and all the players are kind of clumping in the middle of the court, this is a way to spread everyone out and create driving lanes. And this is a really common tactical problem that we run into, which is that we want to encourage players to drive, but you can only drive if there's an open lane to drive. So offensively, this is actually a way for us to get everyone out of the paint. It also, so that encourages a drive for offense, which then creates a defensive emphasis, which is, can you stay in front of your man and not let them score on you? And then in the help side perspective, I have to then it also creates a focus of how do I help and recover to my man, because it also creates the opportunity for not just drives, but drive and kick. We just talked about this age group. It's all about the drive and kick. Yeah. It's all about, now, these kids, for your age groups, I wouldn't say catch the ball outside the 3-point line initially. I would probably say outside the key, because we want to encourage them to catch and shoot. So but most of the kids there might be one team who can actually shoot a 3 with proper form. So we would say we like catch and shoot jump shots outside the key as our version of a 3-point shot. And so what we're saying is that, okay, we were working on, if you've got the ball, you're really trying to drive. And if you don't have the ball, you're getting outside of the key and you're looking for catch and shoot jump shots or drives on catch. And then we just play. Does that make sense? So one of the other things I want to emphasize is scoring systems and scoring rules. So, and we've seen this at a nice variety of levels. Scoring systems are my personal favorite tool for promoting decision-making. Okay, so when Nick Nurse got the head coaching job, actually when he became an assistant with Toronto, the year that he was an assistant, they kind of entrusted the offense to him. Okay, and one of the things he did was he started working with the summer league team in training, and then he also sent them out to go play a lot of pickup basketball together. But when they played, he put a set of rules in for them. And his rules were that corner 3-point shots were worth 4 points, and any shot between the paint and the 3-point arc was actually -1. They lost points if they shot that shot. Okay. What would be the effect of putting these 2 rules in place?
Awareness
of
I actually don't know,
that's all right. What would be your first if you were a player and those are the rules, what would be your first
shot taking, shot decisions?
Definitely emphasizing shot decisions. What shots are you going to avoid?
The mid-range shots.
You're not going to take mid-range shots. And what shots are you going to want to take?
The corner threes. Yeah.
The corner threes.
Yeah, because they give you more points.
What effect would that have on you if you didn't have the ball?
Probably go on the corner three, wait for that pass.
The corner. So you fill the corners.
Yeah.
So what that would do is it would automatically fill the corners, and it would encourage players to shoot threes and
then kick out
and shots in the paint.
Yeah.
Right. So this would basically, and that by itself as 2 rules is already enhancing your spacing and enhancing your shot selection.
Yeah.
Right. Especially the -1, like for a mid-range shot. Holy cow.
Yeah.
I haven't actually done that. What I often do are one of my most common rules now is 2 points for a layup, 2 points for a catch and shoot jump shot, 1 point for everything else. And that starts to kind of get you in this frame of overvaluing the shots we want, undervaluing the shots we don't, but also giving them enough freedom to be like, I'm kind of open for that floater, I'm going to take it. You know, like, we don't want to completely take away everything right now. But you might, you know, like if you've got a team that even with those rules just continues to take bad shots. So you see what so now we're actually shaping decision making through strategically designed games. Right? Both with the ball and without the ball. The Atlanta Hawks created a 4-point line in their gym. So what they did, kind of similar, and if anyone's been paying attention to NBA for the last especially since the Warriors made their run, it's all about, you know, it's really all about the 3-point shot. The 3-point shot has become the kind of the real change agent of basketball, because if you can make 3-point shots, and we'll talk about this kind of in the next section, but like, they are overvaluing this far shot. If you can make a shot from this distance, the effect is to pull defense farther away from the hoop because they're going to want to contest your shot to make you miss. Well, that opens up the middle of the court even more, right? So if you can consistently knock down shots from this farther distance, well, now you're enhancing spacing, you know? And they've done the same thing. So they've set a 4-point line, and they've got a little line here. I don't know if you can see this line here to designate the corner 3. So NBA teams really value the corner 3 because it increases spacing and it's made at a high rate. This is a guy named Damian Farrow. So he's a skill acquisition researcher, academic, and he says that it's the design of games using different scoring systems that require the players to use particular techniques or strategies to win the game. Simply tell the players the scoring system and let them play. Allow them to determine the most appropriate strategy response rather than explicitly telling them the solution. So that's reinforcing a lot of what we've already been talking about. This is a way of thinking about game design. And I'll only spend a minute on it, but effectively, you know, you start with your initial version of the game. So on the left-hand column, right, we're playing the game, whatever game we've designed. You're asking yourself, you know, like, are they playing the way we want to play? Is everyone engaged? Are people kind of coping with the skills required? Are they able to do it? Obviously, is it safe? Are they enjoying it? Does everyone understand it? And is it working? Or is it too hard, too easy, or too one-sided? Okay. And so if you sort of see that it's too hard, too easy, or too one-sided, then you need to kind of dive deeper and make some changes. So if it's too easy, it's because the players are not challenged. You know, teams are scoring too easily, the skills are too easy, and the kids are not very engaged, right? So to change it up, you have to make it harder. You're going to add rules, you're going to make more difficult challenges, you might increase the team size or decrease the area available to play, or reduce the time available to make a decision. So those are 3 ways to do it. To make it harder, add more people to a smaller space, right? If it's too difficult, it's because there's little or no scoring, you know, the quality of play is bad, the players are not coping and not dealing with the skills, so you have to make it easier. So you need to simplify the rules, maybe take a rule away, you could change the equipment. That's more of a PE thing. But really you might increase the size, you might reduce the number of players in this playing area. You might increase the amount of time that they have to make a decision, right? So we want to have that inverse. If it's too one-sided, it's really one team is dominating, and that's where usually I would mix up the teams. That's often one of the first things that I would do, shuffle the teams, swap players. Or in some instances, if I really want a group to be together and I want to keep, and like I might ask the group, like, do you guys want to change the teams? And they'd be like, no, we're good. I might give the winning team some separate rules. I might go to them and be like, okay, I'm not going to tell the rest of the group, but you guys have to do this, or you guys can only do this. And it would really, like, your session would look something kind of like this. Like, you'd start with first game, then you'd move to kind of a second version of the game. You'd reflect on it. You might identify that there's a skill that you really need to work on, you know, and so you might actually do a side practice. So you might do the game, then stop the game for 5 or 10 minutes to work on a specific skill, passing or dribbling or a certain kind of pass that you really want them to do. And then you'd go back and kind of resume the process, or then you might go to game 2, version 1. You know, this is the way that this is coaching. This is coaching. And if you really think about how that translates to a game, it's not that different in the sense that during the context of a game, you're constantly giving direction of how we're adapting the way we're organizing ourselves. So at every timeout, we might even be instituting rules during the course of a game. Hey, I don't want to see another one of these. Hey, anytime we come down, we need to be doing this. You know, like that's the kind of way.
Vince, can I just ask a question?
Yes.
When you're designing a game and you're sort of implementing it, is it worth telling the kids what the skill this particular game is doing, you know, right up? Or do you play the game and then ask the question if they can identify which part of skills we're working on?
Both.
Okay.
Oftentimes it is good to sort of start, particularly if it's a game that they may not enjoy but is really important. Like Keep Away is often a game that's really, really valuable for us, but isn't always the most enjoyable game initially, because you're not scoring through baskets, you're scoring through passing. Yeah. So you might have to give them the rationale at the beginning. Hey, this is a game that we're playing that's really focused on passing and our ability to keep control of the ball. We really want to see if you guys can not turn the ball over or get the ball stolen. That's really helpful. Other times it might be that you just play the game, and then after you play the game for a bit, you stop and have a chat about it. Hey, why are we, and I would actually ask the team, why do you think we're playing this game? And then they'll be like, passing. Like, yes, passing, obviously, but like, give me more, you know, and we have a chat about it. And I think one of the key things is knowing when to have a chat. So often my suggestion would be to start with the game, play for a bit, adapt the game maybe once just to see how they adjust, and then have a chat about some pattern you're seeing, both good and bad, where you sort of say, okay, hey guys, let's just have a chat real quick. Here's what I'm seeing, blah, 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 blah. But there's this other thing I'm also seeing. Like, are you seeing, you know, I'm seeing such and such and such. Are you seeing that too? Yeah. What's happening there? Why is that happening? So you start asking questions. And questions elicit responses, which force them to reflect and think and come up with solutions. Okay, so when we're in that situation, what can we do differently next time? Okay, great. Okay, cool. I also want you to think about this. And then I might give them like one kind of really clear takeaway that's like, I really want you as you're playing to not do this, you know, and that's my time to give my instruction. You know, like they've had a chance to play, they've had a chance to reflect. Now I'm like, boom, okay, this is the thing that really, if you do this, you've learned, you know, and then they get it. And then we might even have another chat at the end. Hey, do you guys see how doing that changes what's happened? Yeah, like when we started doing that, like such and such started happening. And then it becomes a collaborative kind of effort. And it's not just me telling, it's us working together. And I think that's the kind of shift in coaching theory that's happened, where coaching has moved more towards this. I don't know if you've heard this, the kind of metaphor of like sage on the stage versus guide on the side. Like we want to be the guide on the side, right? We don't need to be like the expert knowledge holder who's at the front of the room telling everyone what to do. We want to be the kind of person in the background, kind of talking to them and encouraging them and working with them, but they're the ones on stage, you know? And I think that is the kind of framing that we're trying to create. Cool. All right. I think that's it for that section. Do you want to take another break, or do you want me to just move into the basketball?
I wouldn't mind a little break.
Okay, let's take a break. Cool. Yeah, sweet. Let's take a 5-minute break. So we'll come back at 3:20. Cool.
Sounds good.
Awesome.
Cool.
So now we're in the last home stretch, and the goal will be to get you guys out of here as close to 4 as possible. And maybe in many respects, this is probably the thing you've all been kind of most excited about, is to talk about the basketball itself. I've probably already started alluding to quite a few of the concepts from a player development perspective that we're focused on, but I'll just kind of walk through them now. And actually, the way that I want to do that is through some video. And if you just bear with me for a second, what I want to do is sort of walk through good basketball, I guess. Like that's really what we want to do, because I think at the end of the day, what we want to do is develop good basketball players, and good basketball players are players who play a particular way. That way, it's an interesting evolution because like it's one of those things like you know it when you see it. You know when you see a player who really understands the game and who understands how to move and where to go, and it's the kind of thing that has a degree of consistency over time. I think those of us who are basketball purists are starting to see kind of this current era of basketball being something that's really beautiful to watch because the basketball is so nice. And I think that the Warriors in many respects kind of sparked a lot of that, but we're seeing teams, I mean, just watching even the Jazz and the Nuggets series, there was so much beautiful offense being played. And we're really in an offensive revolution, if we're being honest, you know, like the Raptors play beautiful basketball in many respects. Certainly the Warriors, you know, there's teams that are really predicated on ball movement, passing, high level of skill, and not, you know, there are times where you have to isolate, but we really kind of want to get into this space where we're thinking about basketball obviously as a team game with lots of movement, quick decision making, high level of skill. And good offense takes advantage of that, and good defense is able to shut that down. I think, well, we'll just show you this video because I think that will kind of give you a pretty good sense. This is video from our under 19 boys senior team. And this was playing against American AAU teams last summer in July of last year. I was one of the coaches on this team, and Matt Lacey was the head coach. So I'm just gonna play this one. So just curious, you know, like to get some reactions to that. Maybe Junius, just curious, like what's when you watch that basketball, like what are you seeing from the team in terms of the style of play?
Well, my first observation is it's more on an emphasis on the corner three. So someone is like every offensive play, there's always been a player on each both sides of the floor, which is on the corner tree.
Mm-hmm.
And then the offense starts at the top.
Okay.
And then, yeah, I think they more on spacing.
Mm.
They emphasize more on spacing, and then driving, like motion offense. I think that's the term.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like basic, like, it's the because nowadays, like, 3 points is like the holy grail of basketball. That's how I understand. So the mid-range is dead. There's no more mid-range. So I think the game is like more like that now.
Yeah.
So
yep,
yeah, that's my observation. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've noticed, like, because I on social media I see a lot of like mixtapes of American players, and they're more of isolated players. And what I see from this video, it's very much like teamwork, passing, cutting. It's not a one player team. It's more of it's a shared ball game,
yeah,
which is good. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, and I would say we felt the same way when we were there, because the feedback we got from coaches was that our team played more of a quote unquote international style, which is interesting, right? As a kind of a term, but like, to me, it's just good basketball. It's not necessarily international. But the teams we did play against, particularly Texas, Southwest teams from the U.S., there was a lot of isolation. There was more one player dominating the ball for long periods. There were a few guys who could shoot threes, but they were more specialized into roles. It was more of, here's your big man, and here's your point guard, and here's your shooting guard. And our team was a lot more diverse in terms of roles and responsibilities. There was a much more of a overlap of skills, as opposed to concentration of skills in particular players. And I think that is one of the things that has shaped where we are in terms of the concept of positionless, which I know is important to you, Ange, about getting more of a sense for, which is, we'll kind of get into that. But what was your guys' reaction to watching the film?
Yeah, well, I found, just I always see myself as an amateur, but the 5-out was really plain to see, the 5-out positioning, and then the rotation, and that it was actually, for me, that was just like sort of textbook basketball to watch from, my point of view. Yeah, so it was easy to see, and to see how it works well.
And I think that that group really internalized sort of this notion of making a quick decision, being ready to take your shot when it was your moment. Like, you have to be a threat. Like, everyone's got to be a threat, so you got to be ready for your moment to take a shot or to drive the ball. But also having that balance. I thought they did a good job as a group of knowing that balance between when I need to be aggressive versus when I need to be patient. And that's really the heart of this, right? Basketball is a game of read and react instincts, and these guys developed it. Now, there's some things that helped them. They've been together for quite some time. I thought Matt really did a good job of understanding the basic structure. The players had the skills to do all those things. You had multiple guys who can dribble, pass, and shoot. And when we think about positionless, that's really what we're talking about, is we want to develop the ability to dribble, pass, and shoot in every player, right? And everyone's going to have a starting point and things that they are strong at, and we need to know those things that you're good at and be able to do them and be empowered to do them. But you also want to be challenged to expand beyond your sort of safe zone, and be encouraged to start developing other skills and doing other things. And you need to be put in a position where those other things are required in order to see that, hey, I'm not as good a player as I can be until I develop these other skills, and there's still guys on that team who are not great 3-point shooters, and maybe never were going to become great 3-point shooters, but they did make up for it in a lot of other ways. They were very good cutters. They were very good passers. They were good finishers in the paint. They spaced the court really, really well. So it's not that literally every player has to become an expert in every area, but that's certainly the direction we're sort of moving towards, and that's what's good for kids' long-term development, Corey, what did you think?
Well, even at that level, even though there are threes, they're catch and shoot jump shots. They're rotating the basketball weak side, and moving it, to your point. They were ready to move it. And layups, they're still, even at under 19, that's how they were scoring, and as a team. So, it was good. And no post play, really.
No,
because you don't need that.
It's
right?
interesting because I would highly recommend you guys listen to the podcast from Ross McMahon. So that guy Chris Oliver, who does the basketball immersion, he interviewed Ross McMahon, who's the Tall Blacks assistant coach, and he talked a lot about their offensive system, which is very similar to what what we're talking about now. But he did make one caveat. He said that like generally this is how we play, but we will still post up a player who has shown the ability to be a good post-up player. And so Isaac Fotu, who is a former Harbour rep, who's, from the North Shore, and Ringy Toto, Fotu is a great post player. He's an elite post player. And to your question, to your point, Junius, like this notion of the three-point revolution and the love of the three is really an understanding of efficiency. And I would say that what we're talking about is efficiency more than we're talking about the three. Efficiency is the concept we're interested in. And so I do want to walk you through that a little bit, because I do think it helps kind of govern a little bit of this thinking. The idea is that, so you have a team like Washington State, okay? Washington State is a college team in the US. They were recruiting a North Shore player, and I was able to have a lot of time speaking to them, and they really have embraced some of the thinking. And here's how they frame it. They say, okay, yep, we want to get threes, layups, and free throws. In order to do that, we want to spread the floor as much as possible with at least 4 players on the court at all times that are reliable three-point shooters. Once we have that floor spacing, the challenge offensively becomes about getting paint touches that force the defense to either collapse and give up uncontested threes or layups. You need the threat of the three to open up the opportunity for the layup, right? And you need the threat of the layup to open up the opportunity of the three. They work reciprocally, right? If we're not putting pressure on the rim, then teams can press up and they can take away easy catch and shoot shots on the perimeter, because it's harder to stop someone if you're pressing up. Whereas, if we are really good, if we're not good, then everything happens inverse. Teams will collapse into the paint if they know you're good drivers but can't shoot. They'll collapse. They'll completely just create a gigantic crowd in the paint and won't let you get to the rim. And we see this all the time in youth basketball in particular, because a lot of kids can't shoot from the outside. Even 15, not even talking about threes. We're talking about just 15, 17-foot jump shots. I'm not even talking, we're talking about threes here in adults and 19s, but we're not really talking about threes for our age group. We're really talking about open 15 to 17-foot jump shots, and maybe at the 13 Division I level, you might have some kids who can shoot the three. Maybe 13 Division II, you'll have some kids who can shoot, who are physically strong enough to shoot it. Certainly 11 and under, we really shouldn't be shooting threes. But that doesn't mean that this concept doesn't exist, because we're thinking long-term, that in order for a kid to become a good three-point shooter, he has to become a good catch and shoot jump shooter. In order to become a good catch and shoot jump shooter, it needs to be valued and coached. That means that we need to encourage wide on the baseline. We need to encourage driving to the rim to score and kicking it out when I don't have a layup. And that cycle sort of continuing as we go along. Does that make sense? We do know that statistically, the concept of efficiency means that in the NBA, if I shoot 100 3-pointers, on average, I'm going to get 107 points, 1.07 points per shot. Whereas if I shoot 100 mid-range shots, I'm only going to get 81 points, 0.81 points per shot. That difference is the difference. That is when we say efficiency, we mean that on average, this shot yields more points. Now, why would a mid-range shot that's closer to the hoop yield fewer points than a 3-point shot? That's the sort of interesting question that basketball presented. And what we find is that as long as you're physically strong enough to shoot the distance, the extra point combined with the catch and shoot rhythm and the ease with which you practice the 3-point shot makes it a more accurate shot than a mid-range shot, which is more likely to be contested and is more likely to be a dynamic pull-up type shot, step back or quick pull-up. Those are very hard shots. Fading away, off balance. You have to be incredibly balanced and skilled to shoot a good mid-range shot. Now, it doesn't mean we don't shoot mid-range shots. What it means is that we only shoot great mid-range shots, or we only shoot mid-range shots when we can't get a layup or a three, or a layup or a catch and shoot jump shot. And that would be like a buzzer beating situation. That would be like they've sagged so much I can rhythm step into a nice, easy one, you know? So I'm not sort of, you know, one of those people who's like, absolutely no mid-range, like not at all. Like if it is a genuinely open shot and they're in rhythm and it's a shot we know they can make. And I know how many watched the Clippers game last night, but Kawhi Leonard shoots a lot of mid-range shots. He's a really good mid-range shooter. Like he was 12 for 16 from the field yesterday. That is very efficient. And when we talk about this, we also want to talk about how many shots did it take you to score the number of points you scored? If it took me 20 shots to score 20 points, that's not very efficient. If it took me 10 shots to score 20 points, that's efficient. And when you start to break down where those shots come from, we tend to find that it's mostly layups, threes, free throws, and maybe some mid-range, unless you are an elite special mid-range shooter, and there are some. Does that make sense? Any other questions on that from you guys who I maybe can't see? So Jenny and Ethan and Alex, and I saw you've joined us.
With regards to long passes, how do you think about that?
Long passes?
Yeah.
Like home run passes, like over the top passes?
Long passes, like from court to court.
Yeah, so like I'm not a big fan of the home run pass, like the baseball pass.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I'm not a fan because at this age, most kids are not physically strong enough to throw the pass. And it ends up in lots of turnovers. And I would rather that even if we might miss a few uncontested layups by not passing it, one of the things that you gain from it is more opportunities to try to beat the backcourt pressure with the dribble or with short passes, which is really a skill we need. Like, can you advance the ball across half court with dribbling or short passes? Because I just see the windup. The windup is the problem, right? You see the little kid and he's like kind of starts to kind of throw like that. I mean, by the time you've sort of released it, they already are anticipating what you're doing. The ball goes. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Not a fan. And I would actively discourage it from kids.
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, let's talk about defense because there's a defensive relationship to this. So if the offense is trying to get really great shots and they're trying to space the court and take advantage of the spacing to get these great shots, then defensively wants to do the opposite. So these guys said, well, whereas we play fast defensively, we tend to have a slower tempo. We play fast offensively, we tend to have a slower tempo defensively. So what we want to do is we want to make teams play against us in the full court and then against our set defense in the half court. So we don't want people to get out early in transition to get because that's how you're going to get layups. So great transition teams are efficient because they get layups, right? So one of the first things we need to do is slow teams in transition, and we do that by picking up in the backcourt. And this is something we want to do. We haven't historically been great at this, but it's become a bigger emphasis for me in the Harbour program as a whole of doing more backcourt pressure. Okay, so what they like to do is force opponents to play under duress in the full court, but then we don't give up advantage. We then get into our backcourt defense and they have to play against our defensive rules. And so for these guys, you know, like we want to keep the ball out of the paint. We want to force them to take contested mid-range jump shots, and we want to contest every single shot. So even if they do get an open jump shot from three, we don't let them stay open. We go and we contest, you know? And I think the number one skill that we're looking for to develop as early as possible is the ability of the on-ball to defender to not get beaten on a drive. The most important thing our kids need to learn is to keep to stay between man and ball when their player has the ball, or between man and basket. Do not let your man get a layup. Do not let your man drive around you and score. When we go to Australia, when we go to the US, our older players, we find that this is the biggest skill deficiency that we have defensively. Some of it is physical strength because our kids tend to not be physically that strong. So strength and conditioning is becoming more of a focus for us in terms of building upper body strength, core strength, your ability to absorb contact. But like our kids don't take charges. Our kids are not great at sliding and taking contact to the chest. And so this is a skill that we're going to want to really develop and emphasize defensively. Because if you can prevent a player from driving around you and scoring, there's carryover effects. That means no one has to help you. If someone has to help you, then they've got to leave someone open, which creates open jump shots. So if you're not beaten, then you're not giving up a layup. And if they're not helping, you're not giving a jump shot. And then that offensive player is trying to figure out a way to score. And usually, if you're doing a good job, they're going to have to shoot a fadeaway or a turnaround or an off balance. And those are shots we want them to shoot because they don't go in very well. They don't go in at a high rate. Does that make sense? So I want to show you some, this is kind of the big picture overview. So we want to take great shots offensively. So we want to get a layup or catch and shoot jump shot. We want to avoid something called the tough two. Importantly, keeping turnovers low is really important to this. We would rather a missed shot than a turnover. So one of the things that will happen in your games is you'll see, one of the things you're going to have to do is identify where your turnovers come from, then build games in training that help players reduce that turnover and solve that turnover problem. The long pass is one example. So that's one thing that we already know. But another one is picking up our dribble. A lot of kids pick up our dribble. So you start driving, you don't have a lane, you pick it up. One of the things we want them to do is keep their dribble alive and go back where they came from and then reverse it. Picking up your automatically. Yeah, go ahead.
So what are the drills that would fit into that? Like no turnover or like picking up a dribble?
So there would be two ways to approach it. One of it would be a game like keep away. So keep away is one of the main games that we would play. So keep away is a game of like passing, and the goal of the game is to complete 10 passes in a row on offense. And the goal of defense is to force a turnover till they become offense and then they complete 10 passes in a row. The other way is just in the natural play of games, creating rules. So a rule would be, you could create a no pick up your dribble rule, right? If you pick up your dribble, that's an automatic turnover. That would be a way of actually addressing that, you know? This is kind of like that whole sort of broader scheme of how do I then how do I integrate these issues into my structure as a coach? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah. I would also play I would try to play some games where we have to inbound the ball against backcourt pressure and then advance across half court. So, you know, for example, if you've only got a half court, one of the games that we found is really helpful is to play 3-on-3, inbound the ball from the baseline. All offense has to do is touch the half court line and then come back in the direction that they started to score. And that's a way of both beating pressure and then creating a transition opportunity where you're then trying to score.
Okay.
Most of the game is a scramble game. So because basketball is often in the scramble situation, we want to create scenarios where the concepts and the rules guide us, not the set plays or the specific kind of pre-planned. So that obviously connects to my second point, which is read the game, right? So don't plan your move in advance, be ready to dribble, pass, or shoot, try to make a quick decision if you can. And then defensively, you know, one of the big points of emphasis for us is no walk-ups or easy catches. So what that means is I don't want a player to easily walk the ball across half court on offense. We want to make them work to get the ball across half court. And then when they're in the half court, no straight line drive. So a player should never drive from the 3-point line to the basket uncontested. Should never happen in a game, either because the on-ball defender is too good or because help came to take away the lane. Should never happen. But it'll happen a lot early because the kids just don't know. But then we'll need to build that as a point of emphasis. Reaching and gambling for steals is also a big no-no for me. I hate seeing a player reach, not get the steal, and then now give up a scoring opportunity. So we really want to encourage hands out and defending with your feet. So you have to slide with your feet to stay in front, keep chest in front. Help is really about the low man on the weak side. So one of the things we'll talk about is the split line concept. So if you are 2 passes away, you are on the split line. The split line is a line in the middle of the court. You're sitting there waiting. If someone gets beat, you step up and help, and then someone helps you on the backside. But we really want to do more of playing up in lanes now. So the concept now, and we'll walk through this in training and so forth as we go along, but the big point of emphasis for us is increasing pressure on ball. So we want to be good on the ball, and we want to be in one hand in the passing lane if I'm 1 pass away. Does that make sense? But if someone gets beat, I have to be ready for help. I have to be ready to help. And that's a general concept. So even if, we have rules about who helps, at the end of the day, helping if your teammate gets beat is better than not helping. And there's a lot of kind of just this whole notion of just like always being ready and active to help and recover. So I want to show you, just to finish, a little bit of clips, because I think this will put it all together for you. I mentioned that we send teams to Melbourne every year. And last year we sent, was my second tour to Melbourne. We sent our 13 and under boys into this tournament, and we play against the best Australian teams. And in many respects, I think this is some of the best youth basketball in the world, going to play Southeast Australian club teams. And we always get smashed, but we're getting better. And so I like it because it really reveals our weaknesses. But it also shows some of the things that we're good at, and there are some things that we are getting good at. So this first clip is from my first tour, and it's kind of what we weren't very good at. So we'll just show you this one. So we're obviously Harbour in the maroon. That was a really easy kind of bring the ball across half court, throw it into the post and score. This is a pretty common scenario of he got an offensive foul there by driving in and kind of extending his arm out. So he kind of drove into a very small gap. By extending his arm out, they caught him for an offensive foul. You see with the Australians, like, very patient, taking their time. We didn't do much to really disrupt offensively what they were trying to do there. I know the video is a little bit choppy, but I think part of what particularly happened on this one was, let me just advance a little bit. These guys we really just sort of let them pass around the perimeter for a while, even though they didn't score, easy catch in the post, and their big man basically just missed the gimme, right? So that's not a great defensive possession from us because we never really made them work. We made things too easy for them. And then offensively, this tends to happen a lot where, a ball handler is used to having his way with defense. He's used to being able to kind of come down, make a move, and get to the rim for a score. And that really didn't happen. That really doesn't happen a lot in Australia. at least not initially on a possession. It does sometimes happen if we've been patient. But in this particular game, we struggled a lot. And you see the 2 offensive possessions here. We basically just decided we were going to drive to score. And they did a good job of collapsing. And when they collapsed, we either turned it over, we got an offensive foul, or many cases we just would miss a bad shot. And so what we're trying to avoid is these tendencies offensively to just put our head down, try to bully our way to the basket, and then we don't see where defense is coming and we have no options. So they're not coming to a jump stop and kicking out. They're not on balance on a stop in the paint. You know, they're just kind of driving head down and getting caught in a bad situation. And this is really, really common in young players, really common, especially in New Zealand because we don't play great defense. Because we don't play great defense, offense is often too easily able to just get around your man and get a score. It just doesn't happen against good teams. It might happen occasionally, but it won't happen consistently. And this is why, like, we have to be good defensively against each other. Here, we defensively are not very good at matching up in transition. So what happens is the ball gets advanced fairly easily. They just one cross-court pass, and so quickly they're in the middle of the court, you know? And I think that our ability defensively to pressure the ball and make them have to work is what's crucial. Ironically, in the same game, there was a really nice sequence. We didn't do it consistently enough, but it was a really good sequence that showed kind of the difference between these two kind of things, right? So let's watch this. Part of what is really different in this sequence is this guy. This is Leo. Leo is the smallest player on the team, but he is absolutely hounding this guy defensively. He is applying tremendous backcourt pressure, which means that the guard can't walk the ball up the court. So he's already given our defense an opportunity to match up because he's slowed the ball. This possession ends in a turnover. I think you just see him sort of hounding, pressuring, you know, turning and sprinting. Tavares does the same thing, and he's forced for turnover. And you can kind of see that slight difference of just simply applying pressure. Now, Tavares picked up very high, so he could have gotten beaten, but he did make the initial catch hard. So after that initial catch, he can come off a little bit and just play more position. He doesn't have to literally have no gap between him and the ball handler. But by simply pressing up a bit more and not letting them walk it up or get easy catches, we've already created a better situation for our defense. The key is don't reach in those situations and don't foul in those situations. Apply that pressure without reaching or fouling, because those are the things that hurt us. Fouling obviously can put them in the bonus, and reaching creates a driving opportunity. And then I think offensively, what you also saw, we had a beautiful possession. I think it was, let's see, I think it was this possession. This possession was just wonderful. So they shoot a three and they miss. And in this one, you know, Bart got the rebound, and the previous possession that we saw, he actually gave the ball up to Liam to let him bring the ball up. And that's kind of your traditional, give the ball to the point guard. Let's let the point guard bring it up. But here, Bart's like, no, like I can bring it up too. And so that's that positionless concept, right? Anyone can bring it up. But we want to get to the point where everyone feels comfortable bringing it up. So he's bringing the ball up, and he just reads the court, you know, like, you know, this guy tries to put pressure, goes around him, reading now. And then we've just got beautiful ball reversal, looking for the open man. and then the ball comes back to the guy who started, and he makes a catch and shoot free. You know, that's the kind of basketball that we want to see. We didn't have to slow it up and run a set play. We didn't have to stop to run an offense. We were able to flow naturally into good basketball, and everybody touched the ball. I mean, that it doesn't get more beautiful in terms of the 13 and under grade than something like that. I'll just show you one more clip, and this is from this year, from January of this year, our 13 and under group that went over. We were able to then spend a year really prepping them for this tournament and doing more for our style of play. Now, defensively, I don't think we really got it, but offensively, I thought we made a lot of strides. So this is a nice little kind of 2-minute sequence. We are the team in maroon again. We traveled there. Fouled there. Yeah. So it's kind of, I know it's a little bit choppy and it's a bit hard to kind of get a clear view, but hopefully you got a good enough look at that. Reactions to that? Do you notice a difference in terms of this group compared to the earlier group?
There was definitely more up and down the court in the younger ones, just corner to corner, whereas the other had a lot of motion offense around the key. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, more of a faster pace of the game. Yeah, that's what I noticed.
Some of that was the fact that we were playing a team that was pressing. So they were trying to, pressing is a way to increase pace, right? The game's going to be faster if you're picking up in the full court and creating transition game. But that's okay. We're comfortable playing that. We want to play that way. We can play full court, or we want to be able to slow it up when we have to. And you saw that we did. We had a possession where we really took our time to score, and we got a layup out of it. We got a nice driving left-hand layup out of multiple passes in the half court and everybody touching it. That's what you really want to see happen. Junius, what did you see?
Definitely, they're more like for the previous video. It's like this team is more like in terms of the defense, are applying pressure and right away. And in terms of the offense, just more like they're more organized. They're more like they know what they're doing.
Yes.
They're like compared to the previous video.
And I think that was sort of our goal, was to have a more of a game plan for how we want to play. And, you know, what did you think about the shot selection from this group particularly? Did you notice anything about this group?
It was more I think it was more of more layups than shots from what I saw from the previous video. So yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, in this one sequence, we got 3 layups and we shot 2 threes. One of the threes was a catch and shoot 3 that was swished right away.
Yeah.
The other was a pull-up 3 in transition without any passes in the half court. And so I would say we had one genuinely bad shot in this, which was that pull-up 3. But every other shot was really a shot we won. And I thought that the group as a whole did a good job. And we have a couple pretty good players in here, you know, who do a good job of kind of reading. The key is once you cross half court, you got to read right in that moment. Am I going to push it to try to get to the rim, or are we going to pull it out to try to find something else? And if I push it, I need to be ready for that lane to close. And I thought Troy did a good job of doing that, where he pushed it one time, they collapsed, but he jump stopped. He read, find Jameer, and Jameer made a great play. He was able to go baseline, hit a reverse layup. You know, Jameer himself had a situation where he was in the opposite role, where he was bringing the ball down the middle of the court, and he said, you know what, I only got one guy to beat, I can beat him. And he did, and he got a layup. And so you want to trust players to figure out what fits within their skill set. We have players who didn't shoot it at all. You know, Zen and Maddie didn't shoot at all in either of these possessions, but they made good decisions. You know, Zen was able to pass out of pressure in the backcourt. Maddie was able to get the ball across half court and find the open man and cut. And so we are playing motion. This is 5-out motion. And the way that we are playing is we are spacing out. We are trying to drive if it's there. We are passing and cutting if it's not. We are looking for layups and threes, or layups and catch and shoot jump shots. In this team, we had some kids who can shoot the 3. So they were able to shoot the 3. Cool?
Yeah.
So that's really it. And I know we're right at our time. So I kind of want to stop there. We've covered a lot of material. I don't know that we've gotten to every sort of question that was out there. You know, I'm conscious of time, so if people need to go, that's okay. But I would love to kind of get some just final kind of comments or reactions to this. You know, next steps. What are you thinking? Where's your mind at? You know, what are your sort of takeaways from all of this that we've covered today? And do you have any other questions that you still want to get addressed?
Vince, I just had a very practical one.
Yeah.
You were saying that sort of defense is always quite lacking.
Mm.
Up in a New Zealand-wide thing.
Mm-hmm.
I've always had, well, with my intermediate teams, I've always focused on defense, and that's actually what's got us success and won. So they didn't particularly have amazing offensive skills, but they just worked really hard on defense. And it's like, I was just wondering, you know, the defensive slide in that, what kind of practice games would you sort of involve? Because the way I just had to coach it was just show them what I want them to do positionally, and but you know, I'd probably need more practical sort of games and skill games on defense. What
the first thing is just versions of one-on-one, variations of one-on-one, because our first thing is you need to be able to stop your man. Mm-hmm. So a couple of the different games we want to play, we definitely want to play sort of like confined area one-on-one, where offense is trying to beat defense and defense is trying to stop offense, and we're focusing on particular kinds of techniques. So, you know, there's this sort of full court one-on-one game of try to get the ball across half court as fast as possible, and defense, but narrowing the sort of space available. That's a game that we like to play in terms of a one-on-one game. There are also chasing games, which I think are really good for teaching recovery. So any kind of chasing game where you give offense a slight advantage is it also a defense game, because defense, then we're trying to encourage recovery. So, you know, being able to sprint and recover and slow down and then not foul but contest the shot, right? So like that's the kind of thing. Advantage games in general are really good for defensive help. So an advantage game is a game where we would just give offense some kind of a step on defense. So we create that chase situation, but then we put our help defenders in the position that we want them to. to be, right? So we might put that weak side defender on the split line. We might say, okay, you're there on that split line, you're ready to help, and then we're recovering off of that initial help. And so it's really, like I would say, to be honest with you, most of it teaching defense in this age group is building your game around emphasizing the techniques you want to see and the situations you need to be good at. So even if you do a typical 3-on-3, you can make it a defensive emphasis by changing the rules. For example, you could make the game such that defense scores points by getting stops, not offense scoring by getting scores. And that by itself completely inverts the emphasis. Now players are trying harder defensively. You can also build in rules about particular kinds of situations that you want to avoid. So for example, if someone reaches, automatically out. Boom. If someone takes a charge, automatic point, win. If someone, if you contest a shot, like if offense gets an uncontested shot, automatic out or turn, that kind of a thing. So you want to, all of it is just create a situation and then reward defense with your rules and your points. And then as you go along, stop and identify a pattern and talk about maybe a technical thing that you want to see them do better. Usually in this grade, it's either a question of fouling too much or reaching too much. And they may or may not, because the skill level is not great, but the skill level is good enough that the kids on your team in particular, and I'm thinking about your team, like we want the kids on your team to be getting better at sliding laterally. So you might really want to emphasize sliding laterally, and you can do that. You would really just do that by doing as much one-on-one as possible, where that's what they have to do. And we would often do things like toss the ball to offense. Offense has to attack on the catch immediately, and then defense has to try to fan them out, make offense not allowed to get a foot in the key, for example. Those are kind of games that we would play.
Okay. And I think maybe to your point of if they reach and steal, it's almost like a negative.
Yes.
Because at this age, and I know some particular players, it's worked for them. They'd get the steal, but I know what it is. Like they come up against a better player, and then the player sort of sidesteps them. But unfortunately, at this age, you can kind of see that it more often than not works for them.
Yes, that's the hard part. Yeah, that's hard.
Yeah, so I suppose, incorporating that into the thing that they literally have to do the slide and defense without reaching. Yeah.
Cool.
That's cool. Thank you.
Cool. Other questions?
Question, Vince.
Yes.
So I'm just wondering what is our approach in terms of teaching kids how to rebound? Because at this stage, I understand most kids, like, they just wait for the ball to, they don't just jump. So that's quite challenging for me to coach kids, like to teach them how to rebound the ball. So I'm just wondering what is our approach?
So I would kind of throw it back to you, right? As a group, so you would ask yourself, well, what kind of rebounding situations are you after? You don't just break down rebounding into rebounding. You break down rebounding into rebounding situations. Well, what are we talking about? Are we talking about rebounding when you're the on-ball defender? Are we talking about a weak side rebound? Are we talking about rebounding against a bigger player in the post? Are we talking about out of area rebound? So we want to break down rebounding into the scenarios that come up. So what is the scenario that gives us the most trouble? And then we want to build the game around that scenario. So what scenario are you thinking of in terms of rebounding?
I'm thinking of how to establish a good rebound. Like before you rebound, just maybe do a backs out, and then the timing of your...
Yeah, I would argue that you need to be more specific. So we want it to translate. So we want to create the situation as specifically as possible. So for example, I would start with boxing out the shooter. because that's the most natural, easy one to start with. So we create a rebounding game where a player shoots the ball and the player defending him has to contest, box out, and get the ball, right? That's probably the most natural scenario. Every single game has a tactical decision and a technical execution. The tactical decision is when do I box out? The technical execution is how do I box out, right? So there always has to be that indecision. So I have to box out. So we create that game. We create a game around that. So I would create a game where maybe I have a shooter kind of shoot on a catch and shoot jump shot. Coach maybe starts in the middle of the court at the free throw line. Shooter's on the baseline on the short corner. Coach passes the ball to the shooter. Shooter shoots it. Defender on the pass contests and then has to box out. And then we let them play for a while. And if you get the rebound, then you get a point, right? And you stay on defense as the rebounder because the whole game is to rebound more. So if you don't get a rebound or you give up an offensive rebound, then you haven't won the game. So we would build the game that way. Now, as we went along, we would notice some people doing the technique poorly. And so, okay, well, now we're getting into the conversation that you're talking about, which is how do I actually box out, right? And what we see is kids just turning their back to the offensive player. Well, that's not boxing out. Boxing out is making physical contact with the person you're trying to box out, usually with your chest or forearm. And the way that I was taught and the way I would encourage our kids is put your forearm in their chest. Put your forearm in your chest and sit on their leg. That's the kind of way that we talk about it. Forearm to chest, sit on their leg. Now you're going to take out their momentum and then release to the ball, right? Forearm, chest, sit on their leg, release to the ball. And then when you get the ball, pursue the ball with two hands at its highest point. So that means exploding in the air and grabbing it with two. No snatch rebounds. Don't jog to the ball. Go up, grab it, land with the ball under your chin. We call it chin it. And then you just play like that. And you could mix that up. If we didn't want to have it defending the shooter, rebounding the shooter, we could have a weak side rebound. Weak side rebounds are real killers. So you put the rebounder in the corner, the shooter on the opposite three-point line. The rebounder is on the split line. He's got to box out the rebounder coming from the opposite corner. That's tough. Those are really hard. Now we create the same game. You stay in until someone gets 5 rebounds. If you don't get the rebound, then you're out. The person who got the rebound comes in. Now we got a rebounding game. You do 2-on-2, same thing. Put them in pairs. Have the coach be the shooter. Have pairs at different spots on the court. You got to box out your man. The key in terms of rebounding is getting the kids to figure out when do I need to actually box out and when do I just need to go get the ball. Because there are times where I don't need to box out. I just need to go get the ball. And that's the tactics of rebounding. You know what I mean? We too often reduce rebounding to just simply boxing out, whereas boxing out is a tool as part of a broader rebounding strategy. You know, the biggest thing is to get the ball, to pursue the ball. You pursue the ball, you're going to get a rebound. Others?
Cool.
Is that helpful?
Cool. Yeah.
That was helpful.
Cool. Any other questions or comments? I'll take anything.
Just, I think as we go back in after level 2, my one question would be, so in theory, correct me if I'm wrong, we will not have a training before we play a double header on the 19th.
Now we will. So we're going to convert the
We will?
Fridays. We're going to convert the Friday to training. So originally our Fridays were going to be games. But because we've lost trainings, we will run a Friday training, and then we will have the doubleheader, and then we'll have the Sunday training. So we'll have training, 2 games, training. And those 2 games will be messy. Like, they'll be messy. Yeah. We know. But
cool.
Would love just any final takeaways or comments about today's session, anything that you, just how you guys feel about how you're feeling. I'm sure there's a lot of information swirling in your heads.
Yeah, no, just like the training agenda, like that's what I was like mostly here about, just what to do in trainings, how to improve the players. So I got a lot of help from that. So thanks, Vince.
And the game will inform your agendas.
Yeah, yeah,
So as you play, you'll figure out what you're good at and what you're not good at. So the
exactly.
first trainings before the game are really just getting a feel for the style of training and the general concepts offensively and defensively.
Yeah,
You get into your games, you figure out what you're weak at and what you're strong at, and then you start building your trainings around those issues.
for sure.
So Vince, the trainings from here on out, will they be like the first training? So you'll, you know, will you run it like you did the first training and then we just into groups, or do we sort of take on more of the training? Is it more of a
Definitely the idea is that as we move along the season, I move into the background.
Okay.
There is some value in doing a few shared things together. So like oftentimes if we're doing kind of a very specific warm up that I want to do, I might just say, hey, I'd like to do this today. But I would throw it out to you. Like, would you prefer this next training that I kind of guided, or do you want to just build your training and roll with it, and we can kind of maybe do a shared warm up, but after that you do your thing?
Well, I would say for the next training, I'd really like you to guide it again, because I got a lot out of that first training.
Cool.
And also, and gives us an opportunity to just look at our kids and kind of see where they're at. And we haven't obviously had games to see what we need to work on. So, you know, I think it would probably be useful earlier on if you do that, just for the skills. And then, you know, as we get to know them, we can develop a training around that.
Yeah,
I second that. Yeah.
Cool. I mean, that's probably what I was thinking I would do, but that's good confirmation. So that works. Yeah, cool. Yeah. And then we'll just continue to have chats about it. And what may happen is on that next training, you know, it may be valuable for you to at least kind of finish the last 30 minutes, kind of start to put your imprint on things, your points of emphasis, that kind of a thing. So I would maybe plan to have a thing that you do for the last 20 minutes or 30 minutes. And I can maybe take the first, you know, hour and just put, you know, again, trying to, for me, it helps you, for me to set the kind of guiding concepts and the broader points of emphasis so that, you know, you're not kind of like, you're not a lone voice. And when everyone hears the same message, it's really helpful. And then keep in mind that there's some nuance in this. And so like these concepts are meant to be adapted. So like your goal as a coach is to take the concept. So the concept of disrupt offense and don't let them walk it up. Well, how you do that could vary in terms of, you might want to, I'm not a huge trapping guy, but if you might want to kind of like throw a fake trap, or like you might want to mix up who's on the ball and who's off the ball, or find different ways to disrupt. The biggest thing is putting pressure in the backcourt and not letting them, and having one hand in the passing lane and forcing them to catch the ball moving away from the basket. You know, like that's the kind of thing we want to see happen. How you do it, and if you've got some ideas about how to do it, again, I want to empower you to figure things out that work. You know, little techniques, little sayings, little drills. Really, that's your kind of, that's the creativity of coaching, you know, and that's what's fun.
Cool.
All right. Well, that's basically it. So I think that for those, just from a technical perspective, so we've got 10 days more left of level 2.5 apparently lockdown. So hopefully our thing is that we need the cap to be lifted from 10. Once it's lifted from 10, ideally that's 50 to 100. We then feel confident being able to run competitions and our big group trainings. There may be a few teams that are able to run an individual team training, but that's only if they have a one court facility and they're the only team there, because then they can split into two groups kind of thing. But for our purposes, we really need the group. We need a big group allowance. Our sort of assumption is that, you know, this month we'll get back to a workable situation. And then once we can actually do our trainings and competitions, we'll basically have, our goal is to have 2 Saturdays where we have double headers. We train Friday and Sunday in September. And then there's the break. And when we may run a tournament in that period, because they've just canceled the 13 and under regional tournament. So that's a big blow to us. We were going to host that tournament. That's sort of the pinnacle event that BBNZ runs for this age group. And we were going to have multiple ages in that. The result may be that we just end up running our own local tournament and we try to put all of our teams in it. So that creates more game opportunities. And then in October, after that little holiday period, we'll have Sunday trainings. We'll add a weekday training. We'll have Friday games. Yep. And that basically will be our kind of routine. And I quite like that because I like to go 2 trainings for a game, because I think that allows you to do a little bit more with your group. And keep in mind, we can always scrimmage against each other in trainings. So we can always train together. So you always have the opportunity to still play a competitive 5-on-5 type of scenario. Cool.
Excellent.
In terms of this level 1, so you have completed the practical block for level 1. There are some online courses that you need to complete through BBNZ. If you want to get the official, so to complete the whole thing, you would need to complete the online courses. So there's 2 courses. There's a course based on good sports, and there's a course called Thriving Under Fire. The Thriving Under Fire is like 45 minutes. The good sports one is a little bit longer. And then we would need to do an observation. Now, you don't really need to do anything because if I'm at a training and I'm watching you, I know whether or not you've got it. And then I would basically say yay or nay. But I would tell you when, and we would maybe have a plan for you to design a session and that kind of a thing. But basically the observation plus this course plus the online course gets you the level 1 certification. So yeah.
Cool.
Sweet.
And there's no cost to you for that if you're a rep coach for Harbour. So yeah.
Yeah.
Do you just jump onto BBNZ?
I'll send you the link.
Online.
I'll send you
Cool.
I'll send you.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Any other thoughts or questions?
No, that's it for me.
Just thank you. You took a lot of time to pull this together today, so thanks for that. That was really good.
Big thanks, Vince. Thank you so much.
Cool. Well, don't hesitate to reach out if you've got questions or feedback of any kind. I'm excited to hear it.
Sweet.
Cool.
Cool.
All right, guys.
Thanks, Vince.
Vince.
For your
Ciao.
time.
Have a good day.
You too.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.
Yeah.